Their light flickered across the narrow stone streets of Paris, cutting through the fog that clung to the banks of the Seine. Doors creaked open as armored boots echoed in the darkness. The people of the city, bakers, merchants, widows, peeked through shutters, wondering why the king's men were marching in silence. They carried sealed orders, written in the name of Philip IV of France, and stamped with the authority of the Pope himself. The year was 1307. The day, Friday the 13th. Inside the fortified houses of the Knights Templar, sleep was broken by pounding fists and shouted commands. The men who opened the doors did so in confusion, expecting news from the Holy Land or a royal envoy. Instead, they were met with drawn swords and accusations of heresy. Within hours, hundreds of knights, once the most honored warriors of Christendom, were chained, beaten, and dragged through the mud like common criminals. Their white mantles, emblazoned with the Red Cross, were torn from their shoulders. No one understood why. The Templars had served the Church and the Crown for nearly 2 centuries. They had fought in every crusade, built fortresses that had become legends, and financed kings who now turned against them. Their motto, non nobis, domini, non nobis, sed nomini tua de gloriam. Not unto us, O Lord, but to thy name give the glory, was recited in every chapel they built from Jerusalem to London. And yet, on that cursed morning, the glory of God was replaced by the silence of fear. In the temple stronghold of Paris, Jacques de Molay, the order's Grand Master, was seized without resistance. He was a man of discipline, gray-haired but unbroken, who had seen the fall of Acre, the last Templar fortress in the Holy Land. He had watched comrades die in battle, believing their cause sacred. When the soldiers entered his chamber, he is said to have asked only one question: by whose command? The answer, by the command of the king, was the sound of a world collapsing. Outside, the city watched in disbelief as wagons carried bound knights to prison. Some citizens whispered that the king had gone mad. Others murmured that perhaps the rumors were true, that the Templars worshipped idols, that they consorted with demons, that they had grown too rich and secretive. But among the frightened murmurs, a deeper unease took root. If even the warriors of God could fall overnight, what did that mean for anyone's soul? In the dungeons of the temple, the knights were thrown into darkness. Days turned into weeks. Interrogators came with parchment and torches, demanding confessions. Some broke quickly, crying that they had sinned, that they had spat upon the cross, that they had served a false god. Others, beaten and bloodied, swore until their final breath that the charges were lies, that they had been betrayed by those who envied their power. Meanwhile, King Philip celebrated. The treasure of the Templars, gold, silver, land, and secrets, now belonged to him. Yet when his men opened the vaults beneath the temple, they found little. The gold was gone, the ledgers empty. The Templar fleet, moored at La Rochelle, had vanished into the sea. It was as though the order had prepared for this night, vanishing just before the net closed around them. The Pope, Clement V, issued bulls ordering every kingdom in Christendom to arrest the Templars. Across Europe, from England to Cyprus, the same dawn raid was repeated. An entire brotherhood, thousands of men, erased in a single coordinated act. But behind this apparent unity was deep division. Some kings hesitated, others refused, sensing that something about the accusations didn't add up. Still, fear prevailed. No one wished to oppose both crown and church, and so the Templars fell. But the fall was not clean. It was filled with whispers, of hidden relics smuggled away under moonlight, of coded letters sent to distant preceptors, of a secret known only to the highest ranks. The deeper one looked, the less this seemed like a simple act of politics or greed. There was something beneath the surface, a silence that felt deliberate. What had the Templars found that could terrify kings and popes alike? For years, they had been the guardians of pilgrims to Jerusalem, sworn to protect the roads and holy sites. But they had also dug, 9 nights, for 9 years, beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple. When they emerged, they possessed a new kind of authority, a quiet confidence that no one could explain. Soon after, They were granted immense privileges by the church: the right to pass borders freely, to collect tithes, to answer to no authority but their own. What did they uncover in those subterranean chambers to warrant such favor? As Jacques de Molay sat in his cell, he must have asked himself the same question in reverse. How could divine protection vanish so suddenly? He had lived by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and yet here he was, branded a heretic. Perhaps he thought of the ancient relics once guarded in the temple vaults, or the manuscripts written in strange tongues that the order had gathered from the East. Perhaps he knew that the Templars' true power had never been their swords or their ships, but something far more elusive. The guards would later report that even under torture, the Grand Master never spoke of these secrets. When asked about the alleged idol, the mysterious Baphomet, he remained silent. When accused of spitting upon the cross, he only replied, "We have ever been servants of Christ." There was something in his composure that unsettled his captors. He was not defiant. He was waiting. Weeks turned into months. Trials began. The church demanded answers. The king demanded treasure. Both found less than they expected. But history remembers not what was proven, only what was destroyed. The Templars were burned, their lands seized, their name cursed. Yet, in the ashes of that purge, legends began to grow. People whispered that the order had not perished, only gone underground. Some claimed to have seen their ships sail west under starlight. Others believed their treasure was hidden in crypts and chapels, protected by coded symbols no one could decipher. And through it all, one question refused to die. What was the secret that cost them everything? The night the Templars fell was not just the end of a brotherhood. It was the beginning of a mystery that has haunted history for 700 years. A code written not in ink or gold, but in silence. The fires that consumed Jacques de Molay did not erase the truth. They only illuminated the shadows, and in those shadows, the legend of the Knights Templar began its second life. The story of the Knights Templar truly begins not with fire and betrayal, but with a vow whispered in the dust of a holy city. The year was 1119. The Crusades had already soaked the sands of Jerusalem with blood. Christian knights from across Europe had taken the city from Muslim rule 2 decades earlier, but the Holy Land was far from safe. The road from the coast to the sacred shrines was a road of death, stalked by bandits, mercenaries, and the desperate. Pilgrims were slaughtered, robbed, or simply vanished. Into this chaos rode 9 knights, weary from battle yet bound by a different calling. Their leader was Hugues de Payens, a nobleman from Champagne. Alongside him were men of lesser titles but fierce devotion. They sought neither wealth nor glory. What they asked of King Baldwin II of Jerusalem was strange: permission to form a brotherhood not of conquest, but of protection. The king agreed, though perhaps he didn't fully understand what he was granting. The knights were given quarters on the Temple Mount itself, the most sacred ground in all of Jerusalem, where the ruins of Solomon's temple still slept beneath the stones. They took vows like monks: poverty, chastity, obedience. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The people simply called them Templars. Yet from the very start, their purpose seemed to carry a shadow. 9 knights to protect thousands of pilgrims? It didn't make sense. And yet, for 9 years they lived and worked beneath that mountain, rarely seen, rarely speaking of what they were doing. Their dwellings stood above deep vaults and tunnels from ancient times, chambers untouched since the days when the first temple had been destroyed. Stories soon spread that the Templars were digging, searching, not guarding. Some said they sought relics, fragments of the true cross, or the Ark of the Covenant itself. Others whispered that they sought knowledge, ancient scrolls left by priests of Solomon, containing secrets of the stars, of alchemy, or of a divine power long forgotten. Whatever they found, they did not speak of it. But when they emerged years later, something about them had changed. Their eyes carried a quiet certainty, and their influence began to spread like wildfire. In 1129, Hugues de Payens traveled back to Europe to present his order to the church. What he brought with him astonished the clergy. The Council of Troyes, led by the powerful Bernard of Clairvaux, recognized the Templars officially. The Church blessed them with a rule of life modeled on the Cistercian monks, but with one profound difference. They were holy warriors, permitted to kill in the name of God. Bernard himself wrote their code, describing them as fearless knights of Christ, who advance into battle with the fury of lions and the faith of lambs. The Templars became both monks and soldiers, a fusion of spirit and sword. The contradiction was breathtaking, and perhaps intentional. Soon, recruits poured in from every corner of Europe. Nobles gave their lands, their fortunes, even their sons. The Templars' white mantle, marked with a red cross, became a symbol of purity and blood, of sacrifice. Yet beneath that symbol lay the enigma of their origin. Why had those first 9 knights been so secretive? What had changed between the years of isolation beneath the temple and their sudden rise as holy heroes? There were whispers that Bernard of Clairvaux himself knew more than he revealed, that he saw in the Templars not just a military order, but a vessel for preserving divine knowledge. He wrote of them as a new chivalry, purified of earthly greed. But to some, the way he spoke of their inner mysteries sounded almost like initiation into a hidden doctrine. By mid-century, the Templars had become the soul of the Crusades. Their discipline was legendary. They charged into battle in silence, ranks unbroken even as arrows fell like rain. They refused ransom. They would rather die than be captured. The sight of their banner, the black and white bucient, struck fear into their enemies. Yet, paradoxically, they lived humbly within their commanderies. They prayed 7 times a day. They slept fully clothed, ready for combat or pilgrimage at a moment's notice. Their horses, armor, even their meals belonged to the order. And still, their reputation was divided between reverence and unease. They seemed to live between 2 worlds, monks of heaven and soldiers of earth. As their fame grew, so did their wealth. Kings trusted them to guard treasure and transport funds across continents. Pilgrims used their network of preceptories as safe havens. Slowly, the Templars evolved from protectors of travelers into guardians of Europe's economy. But in these early days, before the gold and the castles, there was something purer and stranger about them. The very foundation of their order rested on the Temple Mount, the most symbolically charged site in the world. It was as if their destiny was intertwined with the ancient wisdom of that place, as if they had touched something sacred and forbidden. Some chroniclers of the age recorded unusual details. They spoke of the Templars' fascination with numbers, the repetition of 9, their geometric insignias, their use of sacred measurements in constructing fortresses and chapels. Their rule contained hidden numerological patterns, subtle allusions to Solomon's temple and the celestial order. To the ordinary faithful, these details meant little. But to scholars of mysticism, it hinted that the Templars carried fragments of a far older spiritual science, one that viewed the universe as a temple built on divine mathematics. Was it coincidence that many Templar churches were circular, mirroring the dome of the rock itself? Or was it a silent homage to something they had learned beneath its floors? Whatever they discovered there, it gave them power, not the power of armies, but the power of certainty. They moved through the chaos of the Crusader world with purpose. They spoke little, fought fiercely, prayed deeply. To friend and foe alike, they seemed to know something others did not. Muslim chroniclers respected them for their courage, even as they fought them. Christian pilgrims revered them as holy guardians. Yet behind every act of valor, a question lingered like incense. What truth had these men touched in the darkness beneath the temple? By the time the first generation of Templars passed away, their legend was already taking shape. The order had grown from 9 knights to thousands, spanning continents. Their banners flew from Jerusalem to Portugal, their rule upheld with military precision. But their origins, those first 9 years of silence, remained unspoken, as if sealed by oath. Some said they had sworn never to reveal what they found. Others believed they had not found a relic, but a revelation. A message meant for another age, a code that would outlive them all. The Holy Land would one day fall again, but the Templars' true fortress was no longer built of stone. It was built of secrecy, discipline, and the strange, enduring sense that they served not merely kings or popes, but a hidden purpose written in heaven long before Jerusalem ever rose from its dust. For 9 long years, the Temple Mount was silent. Beneath its ancient stones, where once the priests of Solomon had walked, the 9 founding knights of the Templar order disappeared from the eyes of the world. No pilgrim saw them riding out to patrol the roads. No chronicler recorded their deeds. Even the king of Jerusalem, Baldwin II, seemed content to leave them to their strange devotion. The people assumed they prayed, fasted, and guarded the sacred precinct. Yet whispers began to rise, soft at first, then spreading like smoke, that the Templars were not simply protecting pilgrims, but searching for something hidden deep beneath their feet. The Temple Mount, even then, was a place of layered mystery. It was said that the very bedrock upon which the dome of the rock stood had been the foundation stone of Solomon's temple, the navel of the world, the point where heaven and earth once touched. To dig there was to disturb not only the soil of history but the boundaries between the divine and the forbidden. Still, the knights descended. They dug through tunnels and sealed chambers left behind by centuries of conquest and ruin, from the time of Babylon to Rome, and then to Islam. What they found, if indeed they found anything, would alter the course of Western history. No written record describes their work. But centuries later, when the Templars had already vanished into legend, documents surfaced. Some authentic, others apocryphal, that hinted at what might have lain hidden there. Among them were references to ancient scrolls written in strange alphabets, fragments of metal tablets engraved with symbols, and chests of relics bound in cedar. The Jewish historian Benjamin of Tudela, traveling in the 12th century, wrote of vaults under the temple where Christian knights labor by torchlight, saying they seek the treasure of Solomon. It was dismissed by scholars of his time as rumor, but even rumors have roots. The first clue to their purpose lies in what happened after those 9 silent years. When Hugues de Payens and his companions emerged, they were no longer poor knights begging for alms. They were men of influence, commanding respect from kings and popes alike. Within months, the Church granted them privileges unprecedented in medieval history. Freedom from taxation, exemption from local laws, and direct accountability only to the Pope. Such favor was unheard of for an untested order. It was as if the Templars had returned from Jerusalem not with relics, but with revelation. Something so powerful that the Church itself had to bring them into its fold, not to destroy them, but to contain them. What could that revelation have been? Some believe they found relics of immeasurable holiness. Perhaps the Holy Grail, believed to be the cup of Christ, or the Ark of the Covenant, long thought lost since the destruction of the First Temple. Others claim they discovered ancient documents, the missing books of the Bible, or secret gospels suppressed by the early Church. There are even tales that they unearthed knowledge from an older civilization altogether, mathematical and astronomical wisdom that would later reemerge in Europe's Gothic cathedrals. One legend tells of a sealed chamber lined with gold, containing a stone altar and beneath it, a small chest marked with the symbol of the Tetragrammaton, the name of God. Another speaks of iron-bound caskets filled with manuscripts in Aramaic and Greek, describing the architectures of creation. The same geometries later echoed in Templar architecture. Skeptics dismiss these accounts as medieval fantasies, but the evidence of influence is harder to ignore. Within a generation of their return, the Templars were financing the construction of cathedrals across Europe whose design broke entirely with Romanesque tradition. The soaring spires, the perfect symmetry, the stained glass alive with hidden numerology, all bore the stamp of sacred geometry, a language that mirrored the cosmos itself. Perhaps this was the treasure they found. Not gold, but knowledge, the ancient science of harmony, the code that joined heaven and earth. Such knowledge would have been both precious and perilous. To possess it was to challenge the monopoly of the Church, to hold in one's hands a key to divine creation that no pope could sanction. No wonder secrecy became their second nature. Yet there are darker versions of the story. Some claim the knights found not divine wisdom, but something blasphemous, a truth so shattering that it would undermine the very foundations of Christianity. According to these whispers, the Templars discovered documents suggesting that Jesus was not divine in the way the Church taught, or that his bloodline continued through descendants hidden for generations. Others suggest they found pagan artifacts or writings from sects deemed heretical, Essenes, Gnostics, or even pre-Christian mystics. To the medieval mind, such discoveries would be intolerable, perhaps even worth erasing through fire and steel. Whatever they uncovered, it changed them. The early Templars returned to Europe as men of vision. They moved with purpose, building commanderies not just as fortresses but as spiritual waypoints, arranged along sacred lines that some modern researchers have mapped as part of a grand design. From Jerusalem to Paris, from Chartres to Scotland, their presence seems to trace invisible geometry. A vast web of faith, power, and perhaps something more. Could this have been part of the hidden code that defined their order? There are clues left in stone. Templar churches often took the form of a circle, echoing the dome of the rock, the same sanctuary under which they had dug. In medieval symbolism, the circle represented perfection, eternity, the divine. Why did warrior monks, sworn to Christian orthodoxy, choose an architectural form that so closely mirrored Islamic and pre-Christian sanctuaries? Was it reverence for the site where they had made their discovery, or an encoded message paying homage to the source of their enlightenment? Later chroniclers would attempt to simplify the mystery, claiming the knights sought only material relics to inspire devotion among pilgrims. Yet this explanation feels too small, too ordinary for the transformation that followed. The Templars rose from obscurity to become not just soldiers of Christ, but the custodians of Europe's most sophisticated network of knowledge and finance. It was as though they carried a secret confidence that others could sense but not see, a certainty born of something they had witnessed in that underground darkness. Hugues de Payens himself never spoke of those years. His surviving letters are practical, disciplined, almost cold. But between the lines, there is an undertone of awe. He writes of light found in darkness, of truth sealed beneath the mount, revealed only to those who serve without fear. Such words read less like the pragmatism of a knight and more like the cryptic reflections of an initiate. When the Templars began their rise, their reputation for purity and courage made them beloved. Yet from the very beginning, a faint shadow followed them, the sense that they were not simply servants of the Church, but keepers of a deeper faith. It was this perception, perhaps, that would one day lead to their destruction. But in these early years, the secret they carried was still safe, buried beneath centuries of silence. As the last rays of the Jerusalem sun touched the dome of the rock, the knights would have seen the city glow like fire, the holy city, where heaven once met earth. Somewhere beneath that radiance, in tunnels now lost to time, the Templars had uncovered something that would echo through history. They emerged not merely as guardians of pilgrims, but as guardians of a mystery, one that would outlive empires, one that would one day cost them everything. The transformation of the Templars from poor knights to Europe's most powerful order was so rapid, so astonishing, that even in their own time it seemed touched by divine favor, or by something else entirely. When Hugues de Payens and his brothers returned from the Holy Land, they carried no visible treasure, no captured spoils, yet their fortunes rose with impossible speed. Donations poured in from nobles who had never met them. Whole estates, vineyards, and castles were gifted to this new order of the Temple. Within a single generation, they went from living in borrowed quarters on the Temple Mount to owning some of the richest lands in Christendom. The paradox was striking. They called themselves paupers milites Christi, the poor knights of Christ, yet their coffers overflowed with wealth. Their ascent was not built on conquest but on faith and reputation. The Church's official blessing, granted at the Council of Troyes, turned the Templars into a holy ideal. Kings trusted them implicitly. Common people revered them. To join the order was to surrender everything: land, title, gold, and yet, paradoxically, by doing so, the order itself became richer. Each knight took vows of poverty, but their collective fortune grew beyond imagination. This contradiction did not go unnoticed. Some saw it as proof of divine providence, others as the first sign that their mission held more than met the eye. But the Templars' true genius was not only spiritual. Beneath their monastic discipline lay the mind of administrators, builders, and financiers centuries ahead of their time. They built a vast infrastructure across Europe, preceptories that served as both command posts and safe havens, connected by a network of coded communication. Within these fortresses, Templars created a system of accounting so advanced it would later be recognized as the forerunner of modern banking. A pilgrim could deposit money in London and withdraw it in Jerusalem, bearing only a coded letter from the order. That simple idea, security through secrecy, was revolutionary. To kings constantly at war, the Templars became indispensable. They lent money to monarchs, financed crusades, and even managed royal treasuries. The French crown, the English crown, the papacy itself, all relied on the Templars' financial machinery. Their ships carried cargo across the Mediterranean. Their knights escorted gold from Paris to Acre. They minted their own coinage, maintained their own courts, and answered only to the Pope. Slowly, quietly, they became a power without borders, an invisible empire woven through every layer of medieval society. With wealth came wonder, and with wonder, suspicion. Ordinary Christians saw the Templars as both saints and sorcerers. How could men who had renounced personal property command such riches? How could warriors who never married, who spent their lives in prayer, possess castles grander than kings? Some whispered that they had found Solomon's treasure in Jerusalem and were using it to buy influence. Others believed they had struck a bargain with forces not entirely holy. Yet no proof ever emerged. The Templars themselves neither confirmed nor denied. They simply carried on, efficient, disciplined, and impenetrably silent. Their discipline was their power. Templar fortresses were more than strongholds. They were centers of innovation. Their builders used techniques unseen in Europe before: fortified keeps with concentric defenses, secret tunnels, water systems, and symbolic carvings hidden in the stone. The architecture itself seemed to speak in riddles. Circles, triangles, and precise geometric ratios appeared again and again, as though every wall and arch was part of an unseen equation. To outsiders, these details were decoration. To initiates, perhaps, they were reminders of the order's hidden origins beneath the Temple Mount, a silent language of proportion and perfection, passed from Jerusalem to Europe. The Templars' reach extended across continents. In Portugal, they built Tomar, a citadel that still stands like a riddle carved from rock. In Spain, they fortified the frontier against the Moors. In France and England, they acquired land through gifts and bequests, managing estates with remarkable efficiency. Their commanderies became self-sufficient communities, farms, mills, vineyards, all run with monastic precision. Every grain, every coin, every sword was accounted for. Nothing was wasted, nothing left to chance. Their military might remained formidable, but by the mid-13th century, the Templars had become as much administrators as warriors. Their Red Cross still rode into battle, but their truest victories were won in parchment and stone. When other knights returned from crusades broken and penniless, the Templars endured. They seemed untouchable, protected by God, or perhaps by the web they themselves had spun across Europe's fragile balance of power. Yet beneath this outward success, the seeds of danger were already sown. Their independence, once admired, began to inspire fear. The Templars owed allegiance to no king, no bishop. Their loyalty was to the order and to the Pope alone. In an age when monarchs sought to consolidate power, such autonomy was intolerable. They held lands within every realm yet answered to no crown. They moved money across borders faster than any ruler could track it. They were a state within states, a church within the church. To some, they were the embodiment of divine order. To others, they were a threat to sovereignty itself. Among those who watched their rise with growing unease was King Philip IV of France. Ambitious and perpetually in debt, Philip saw the Templars as both creditors and rivals. Their fortress in Paris, the Temple, stood only a short distance from his palace. Its towers higher, its vaults deeper. Inside lay the treasure of France itself, guarded not by royal soldiers but by the very men the king owed money to. Philip's pride could not bear it. The thought of knights, bound by vows to a foreign pope, holding the keys to his fortune, festered like a wound. But in the early years of the order's prosperity, few could imagine how that tension would one day ignite into catastrophe. For now, in the 12th and early 13th centuries, the Templars' reputation shone like the dawn. They were the living symbol of Christendom's crusading dream, a brotherhood of faith and steel. Their banner flew beside kings and emperors. Their wealth built cathedrals and armies. Yet even their admirers sensed something unearthly about their fortune, as if guided by a hand unseen. They act, wrote one chronicler, as though they know the will of heaven before it is spoken. Perhaps they did. For the Templars, wealth was not an end but a means. To them, gold was a tool of divine purpose, resources gathered for a mission that no one outside the order fully understood. Some believed they prepared for a final crusade, a war not for land but for truth itself. Others thought they were building a new kind of kingdom, a spiritual empire founded on order and knowledge. Whatever their goal, they moved toward it with relentless precision. By the time the 13th century waned, their influence had reached its zenith. The temple in Paris stood as both fortress and treasury, its vaults glittering with the riches of Europe. Pilgrims prayed in Templar chapels from England to Cyprus. Their red cross had become a symbol not of poverty, but of power. And yet, as the years passed, a chill crept through their ranks. The Holy Land was lost. The Crusades had failed. Their purpose, at least the one the world knew, was fading. What, then, was left for an order born to protect a world that no longer existed? Perhaps the answer lay in the secret they had carried from beneath Jerusalem, the mystery that had guided their rise, hidden in plain sight within their architecture, their rituals, their silence. They had risen higher than any order before them. But the higher one climbs, the longer the shadow becomes. And soon, that shadow would stretch toward the throne of France itself. By the middle of the 13th century, the Templars had become something almost impossible to define. They were no longer merely knights or monks. They were an invisible empire, operating across continents. Their influence felt in every corner of Christendom. From the fortresses they built along the Mediterranean to the quiet preceptories scattered across the French countryside, the order moved with a certainty that seemed almost unnatural. They answered to no king, no duke, no local lord. Their allegiance was to the Pope alone, yet even the papacy tread carefully around them. The Templars were untouchable, not because of their arms, but because of the web of wealth, knowledge, and loyalty they had spun over decades. In France, England, and the Italian city-states, Templar preceptories served as hubs of both commerce and sanctuary. Merchants entrusted the order with their gold. Pilgrims relied on their protection. Kings, constantly embroiled in war and debt, borrowed funds from the Templars, secured not with collateral but with the reputation and discipline of the order itself. A Templar could move gold from Paris to Acre faster than a royal courier could even secure the papers. They operated an early form of banking, with letters of credit and a system of encrypted communication that allowed them to transfer wealth across borders without fear of theft. Their logistical genius was matched only by their secrecy. Even within Europe, few knew the full extent of their holdings. Their fortresses were more than military installations. They were architectural marvels and centers of intelligence. Concentric walls, hidden chambers, underground passages, and strategically placed watchtowers made them nearly impregnable. But the Templars' real strength was in the invisible networks they created. A knight in one commandery could request assistance from another hundreds of miles away, and aid would arrive before anyone else knew it was needed. They were masters of information, tracking troop movements, trade routes, and political developments across kingdoms. In a sense, the order was a living organism, its preceptories like nodes in a vast network of power. Pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land often relied entirely on Templar protection. Roads that were once deadly became relatively safe under the order's watch. Inns and hospices they managed provided shelter, food, and medical care. Yet their presence was never obtrusive. A Templar knight might ride silently alongside a caravan for days, watching, calculating, waiting. To outsiders, it seemed as if the order operated by divine intuition. To insiders, it was a careful application of discipline, intelligence, and strategy. Every move was calculated, every resource allocated with precision. Their influence extended into the courts of kings and the councils of bishops. The Templars could sway decisions not through diplomacy alone, but because they were indispensable. When a king waged war, the Templars provided both funds and soldiers. When a city faced rebellion, their fortifications and trained knights ensured order. They became arbiters of power without formally holding it, a paradox that both awed and terrified those who encountered them. One chronicler noted that they hold the balance of kingdoms lightly in their hands, yet none may grasp it from them. Yet, for all their outward authority, the Templars were still bound by a strict monastic code. Every day was regimented with prayer, study, and training. Knights were expected to meditate on scripture, perfect their martial skills, and uphold the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Even as they managed vast wealth, personal luxury was forbidden. This tension between immense collective power and individual austerity became the defining characteristic of the order. It was as if they had discovered a formula that allowed them to wield influence without succumbing to the corruption that so often accompanied wealth and authority. It was in this delicate balance that the true mystery of the Templars emerged. They wielded incredible power, yet no one could claim total knowledge of it. To their enemies, they were untouchable. To their allies, they were indispensable. And within the order itself, only the highest-ranking members were privy to the full scope of their operations. Even preceptors in distant lands knew only what they needed to know. The order was designed to operate as a series of compartments, each part essential but never revealing the whole. This secrecy protected not just their wealth, but their mission, whatever that mission truly was. Their influence also extended into culture and education. Templar commanderies often housed libraries containing texts from the East, including works on mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy that were rare or forbidden elsewhere in Europe. Some historians suggest that these libraries served as repositories of knowledge the Church considered too dangerous for general circulation. In addition to martial training, knights were instructed in these disciplines, creating a corps of men both physically formidable and intellectually exceptional. It is no coincidence that some of Europe's greatest Gothic cathedrals were influenced by men trained in Templar design principles, incorporating mathematical precision and astronomical alignment into their construction. Despite all this power, the Templars remained outwardly loyal to their original mission, the defense of pilgrims and the protection of holy sites. Their martial orders never wavered, and they continued to fight in the Crusades long after the loss of the Holy Land. But the loss of Jerusalem had changed the order fundamentally. With no singular battlefield, no central fortress to defend, the Templars became more inward-looking, more secretive. The true purpose of their work, some historians speculate, had shifted from open warfare to the guardianship of hidden knowledge, sacred relics, and esoteric wisdom. In this sense, the order was evolving into something unprecedented, a multinational organization operating on the edge of legality, faith, and mystery. Yet, the higher the Templars rose, the greater the envy and fear they provoked. Kings coveted their wealth, feared their independence, and resented their immunity to local laws. Bishops and popes both admired and distrusted them. The order's very success made it a target, though few could imagine the scale of the eventual attack. And still, the Templars moved with confidence, as if aware that their mission was larger than any single monarch or pontiff. The invisible empire they had created was designed to endure, to operate in shadows, and to preserve the secret they had carried from Jerusalem through generations of warriors and scholars. Perhaps this was the true power of the Templars. Not their swords, not their castles, not even their gold, but the ability to shape events from behind the veil, unseen yet omnipresent. In a Europe ruled by kings, popes, and feudal lords, they became the silent architects of destiny, a force whose influence was felt far beyond what history might initially reveal. And as their reputation spread, so too did the stories, legends, and fears that would one day culminate in their dramatic downfall. The Crusades had long since ceased to be simple campaigns of faith. They were wars of politics, ambition, and survival, painted in the colors of holy devotion. By the late 12th and early 13th centuries, the Templars had been at the forefront of nearly every battle in the Holy Land, their white mantles marked with red crosses cutting through the sands like specters of justice. They were no longer merely soldiers. They had become the living embodiment of a cause greater than any single king or kingdom. Yet even as their reputation grew, the ground beneath them shifted, and the world they had fought to protect began to crumble. The fall of Jerusalem in 1187, at the hands of Saladin, was a catastrophic blow to Christendom. The Templars, seasoned and disciplined, fought to the last, defending every fortress and bridge, holding their positions even as entire armies collapsed around them. The siege of the city was brutal. Blood soaked the streets, and the cries of the wounded echoed from the broken walls. Knights charged repeatedly into impossible odds, not for glory, but for the pilgrims who depended on their protection. Their courage became legend, but the loss of the city marked a turning point. The Templars realized that their sacred mission had become a battlefield without borders, a war they could not simply win with swords and shields. As the crusading armies retreated, the Templars adapted. They were no longer just warriors defending a city. They became strategists, diplomats, and keepers of knowledge. Their network of commanderies served as lifelines for both soldiers and pilgrims, ensuring safe passage through dangerous territories. Fortresses that once served purely military purposes now became centers of learning, logistics, and sanctuary. The Templars' ability to blend martial discipline with administrative genius allowed them to maintain influence even as the Crusader states weakened and fell. Yet there was a profound tension within the order. The loss of Jerusalem, Acre, and other holy cities forced them to confront the fragility of their purpose. They had been born to defend the sacred sites, to be the shield of pilgrims, and to maintain a visible presence in the Holy Land. Now, their mission required secrecy, foresight, and subtlety. They had to shift from the battlefield to the shadows, from swords to symbols, from open combat to covert guardianship. Some knights struggled with this transformation. Many had trained for glory in the sun, only to find that their new battles were fought in whispers, through coded messages, and in the corridors of power across Europe. It was during this time that the Templars' reputation for invincibility began to take on a mystical dimension. Tales spread that they were not mere mortals, that their discipline, courage, and unwavering faith gave them a form of supernatural protection. Chroniclers recorded stories of knights emerging unscathed from hopeless battles, of small bands holding entire cities against overwhelming forces. Muslim historians, too, spoke of them with respect tinged with fear, describing the white-clad warriors as fearless, unyielding, and uncanny in their coordination. These legends served a dual purpose. They inspired fellow Christians and intimidated enemies, but they also fed the perception that the Templars were custodians of a hidden knowledge, something beyond ordinary human understanding. As the Crusader states fell one by one, the Templars' focus shifted towards safeguarding what remained: relics, manuscripts, and knowledge too precious to leave behind. They began to withdraw strategically, consolidating their holdings and fortifying positions along the coasts and key trade routes. Their fleets, once auxiliary to crusading armies, became vital in controlling maritime passages, transporting treasure, and maintaining the flow of information between Europe and the East. The loss of territory forced the Templars to innovate, to evolve from soldiers into administrators of a far-reaching network, ensuring that even in defeat, they retained influence. Their adaptation was remarkable, yet it also made them increasingly mysterious and, to some, threatening. Kings and popes alike began to perceive that the Templars had grown too independent. They held wealth no monarch could claim, maintained armies no king could command, and operated across borders with near impunity. The very qualities that had made them indispensable in the Holy Land now sowed the seeds of envy and fear in Europe. The Templars had become untouchable, yet untouchability breeds suspicion. The seeds of their eventual downfall were planted not in the East, but in the hearts of those who coveted their power at home. Despite these challenges, the Templars continued to perform feats of daring and devotion. They defended Acre during its final siege in 1291. Fighting to the last man to protect the remaining Christian presence in the Holy Land. Their valor was unmatched, their strategy impeccable. But as the city fell, and with it the last vestiges of the Crusader kingdoms, the Templars confronted an existential crisis. Their raison d'etre, defending pilgrims and holy sites, had vanished. The mission that had justified their wealth, their autonomy, and their sacrifices now seemed to have no stage. Yet even in retreat, their influence endured. The order retained a vast network of estates, commanderies, and fortified castles across Europe. They were custodians of treasure, knowledge, and a tradition of discipline that no king or pope could fully control. In many ways, the fall of the Holy Land marked the beginning of a more secretive, more enigmatic phase in Templar history. The battles fought in sun-scorched fields were replaced by struggles for information, influence, and the protection of secrets too dangerous to reveal. It is here, in this transitional period, that the Templars' true genius becomes apparent. They were not defeated by swords or armies but by circumstance, the collapse of the world they had fought to protect. In response, they adapted, turning their focus inward and outward simultaneously. Inward, to preserve the order's cohesion, discipline, and knowledge. Outward, to maintain influence across kingdoms and the Church. This dual strategy ensured that even as their role in the Crusades ended, their presence in history was only beginning to deepen. Through courage, intelligence, and adaptability, the Templars transformed loss into opportunity. The battlefield was gone, but the Order's mission had evolved into something subtler and perhaps even more dangerous to those in power. A network that operated silently, with eyes and hands across Europe and the Mediterranean, controlling wealth, information, and influence. By the time their enemies would finally turn against them, the Templars had already laid the foundation of an empire that could not easily be erased. In this era of blood and sand, their legend grew. Tales of their heroism, cunning, and devotion circulated across both Christian and Muslim lands. They became more than warriors. They were symbols of discipline, mystery, and unwavering purpose. And yet, behind every victory, behind every fortress and fleet, lay a question that few dared to ask. What were the Templars truly protecting? Was it relics, wealth, or something far more dangerous? Knowledge and secrets so powerful that their loss could threaten the Church itself? As the sands of the Holy Land shifted with the winds of history, the Templars realized that their battles were far from over. They had survived defeat, adapted to changing circumstances, and preserved their order. But the greatest challenge awaited them not in Jerusalem or Acre, but in Europe, a world where kings coveted their power, popes questioned their loyalty, and the very secrets they carried could ignite a storm unlike any battlefield had ever known. The Templars' growing wealth and influence in Europe during the 13th century was unprecedented. Yet it also marked the beginning of a perilous journey toward their downfall. They had amassed vast estates, built impregnable fortresses, and controlled treasure hoards that rivaled the coffers of kings. Their network spanned from the Iberian Peninsula to the Holy Land and back, a web of commanderies, preceptories, and safe houses that allowed them to move men, money, and information with astonishing efficiency. It was a system that no monarch could fully control, and no local lord could challenge. In a world ruled by feudal hierarchy, their independence became both their greatest strength and their gravest vulnerability. Their financial power was particularly alarming to the kings of Europe. The Templars lent money to monarchs, collected tithes, and managed trade routes, often stepping into roles normally reserved for the state. Their bookkeeping was meticulous. Each transaction, deposit, and withdrawal was recorded with precision, often in ciphered ledgers incomprehensible to outsiders. This financial acumen earned them trust and fear in equal measure. Philip IV of France, burdened by debts from wars and extravagant projects, saw the order not only as a creditor but as a competitor. The Templars' independence, their ability to mobilize wealth across borders, and their immunity from local taxation created tension that would eventually escalate into conflict. Templar fortresses in Europe reflected more than martial strength. They were symbols of a power that seemed to defy human hierarchy. La Rochelle, Paris, and other key holdings were not merely military installations. They were centers of administration, finance, and ritual. Within their walls, knights trained rigorously, but they also studied sacred geometry, astronomy, and languages. Some chroniclers hint that the Templars preserved knowledge from the East, including texts and manuscripts that the Church considered dangerous or heretical. Whether true or exaggerated, These rumors contributed to an aura of mystery that surrounded the order. Outsiders often interpreted their intelligence and discipline as evidence of hidden, possibly blasphemous, knowledge. The secrecy of the Templars was deliberate. The order operated like a vast machine, with compartments designed to protect both knowledge and mission. Local preceptors managed estates and recruited knights, but the inner workings, the true purpose of their power, remained accessible only to the highest ranks. Each knight took vows of obedience, not merely to God, but to the order itself, ensuring a loyalty that superseded kings and popes. This internal cohesion was remarkable, yet it sowed unease among rulers who could not fathom an organization answering to no earthly authority. Philip IV's growing hostility toward the Templars was driven not solely by envy or greed but by fear. The French king faced mounting debts from years of war, and the Templars held both the purse strings and the infrastructure to challenge his authority if provoked. Rumors circulated that the order had amassed secret knowledge from the Temple Mount, relics capable of reshaping the balance of power in Christendom. Such stories, whether founded or not, painted the Templars as a hidden state within the state, a kingdom of their own making. Philip's obsession with their destruction was a mixture of practical calculation and paranoia, as if he sensed that the order's true strength lay not in swords or castles, but in the invisible web of influence and secrecy they had spun over centuries. The order's financial and military independence had been carefully cultivated. In addition to loans and estates, the Templars operated an early form of international banking. Merchants and nobles deposited wealth for safekeeping, confident that it could be transferred securely across hundreds of miles. The order's knights acted as couriers and guardians, transporting funds through networks that remained incomprehensible to outsiders. This system was more than economic, it was political. It allowed the Templars to exert influence indirectly, shaping decisions in courts and councils without ever appearing to intervene directly. Their autonomy, however, made them a target for propaganda and fearmongering. Stories of heresy, idol worship, and blasphemy began to surface, often whispered in corridors of power or circulated in anxious towns. Allegations of the Templars worshipping a mysterious idol called the Baphomet, or engaging in secret rites, were spread long before their arrest. Whether these stories were based in truth or invented by envious rivals, they were effective. They created a climate of suspicion that would later justify Philip's drastic actions. Even loyal supporters began to question the order, if only quietly, afraid of being associated with a power beyond their comprehension. Despite these growing threats, the Templars continued to operate with precision and discipline. Knights followed a rigorous daily schedule of prayer, training, and administration. Preceptories functioned efficiently, producing income, training soldiers, and maintaining networks of communication. Their fortresses were marvels of design, incorporating defensive innovations, hidden chambers, and cryptic symbols. Some modern researchers suggest that these symbols were more than decorative. They may have encoded knowledge from the order's early years in Jerusalem, remnants of secrets that had survived centuries of upheaval. Templar ships controlled maritime trade in key regions, ensuring the safe passage of pilgrims, treasure, and messages. Their fleets were strategic assets, capable of projecting power and securing supply lines across the Mediterranean. This mobility gave the order unprecedented reach, allowing them to act as both protectors and arbiters in conflicts between states, and further enhancing the perception that they were a state unto themselves. Their ability to move freely across borders, immune to taxation or interference, magnified both their power and the envy of kings who could not match it. By the late 13th century, the Templars' combination of wealth, discipline, and secrecy made them appear almost untouchable. Yet the very qualities that had secured their influence now marked them for destruction. Their autonomy, the loyalty of their knights, the secrecy of their archives, and the rumors of hidden knowledge created the perfect storm. Philip IV, deeply in debt and desperate to assert control, saw in the Templars not allies, but a threat to his authority, a challenge that required decisive and ruthless action. This period also revealed the psychological power of the Templars. Their discipline and stoicism in the face of danger created a perception of invincibility. Rumors of their esoteric knowledge and mysterious origins enhanced their mystique, giving rise to both admiration and fear. People spoke of knights who could anticipate attacks, of fortresses designed with secret passages that seemed impossible to penetrate, and of preceptories that operated as autonomous kingdoms within kingdoms. This aura of omnipresence and infallibility, cultivated over decades, was both their shield and, ultimately, the reason their enemies felt compelled to act. The Templars' rise in wealth, influence, and secrecy had made them more than an order of knights. They were an institution that transcended traditional boundaries of church and state, a web of power operating in plain sight yet comprehensible to very few. Their independence was their strength, but it also isolated them politically, making them vulnerable to a monarch willing to exploit fear, envy, and rumor. Philip IV would not need to defeat them on a battlefield. He only needed to turn public opinion and the church against them, using the weight of accusations and legal authority to destroy the very order that had seemed untouchable for centuries. By the late 1290s, the Templars stood at the zenith of their power, admired, feared, and envied across Europe. They had survived the fall of Jerusalem, adapted to the loss of their original mission, and built an empire of wealth, influence, and secrecy. Yet beneath this veneer of control, the seeds of disaster were already taking root. The very structure that had ensured their survival and dominance, discipline, secrecy, loyalty, and wealth, would soon be weaponized against them. Their enemies would find no fault in their valor or piety. Instead, they would exploit the fears and envy that the Templars had accumulated through decades of extraordinary success. By the closing decades of the 13th century, the Knights Templar had transformed from a small band of devout protectors into a pan-European power whose influence extended into every corner of Christendom. Yet, with that transformation came vulnerability. Their success, while unmatched, had created a tension that simmered beneath the surface. A tension between kings and popes, between admiration and fear, between devotion and suspicion. The very qualities that had ensured their survival for centuries, their wealth, discipline, secrecy, and autonomy, now made them targets for envy and conspiracy. King Philip IV of France, known to history as Philip the Fair, exemplified this tension. His reign was marked by constant financial strain. Wars with England, territorial disputes, and the demands of maintaining a court both lavish and centralized left him in perpetual debt. The Templars, by contrast, were the epitome of fiscal efficiency. They lent money to monarchs, collected rents from estates across Europe, and managed treasure with unmatched precision. Their coffers were a fortress, their ledgers a weapon. To Philip, they were not merely creditors. They were a symbol of authority he could not command and a reminder of his own inadequacy. The Templars' independence, once a source of admiration, now fueled a deep-seated resentment. Philip's desire to control or eliminate the Templars was further intensified by rumor and fear. Stories circulated of secret rituals, mysterious idols, and arcane knowledge gathered during the Order's early years beneath the Temple Mount. Chroniclers and churchmen hinted at practices that bordered on heresy, claims that the knights had spurned Christ in secret, worshipped a being called Baphomet, or engaged in rites designed to bind them together through occult power. These whispers were amplified by the human tendency to fear what is not understood. For many, the Templars were no longer simply monks or soldiers. They were an enigma, a force operating above earthly law, with motives no one could fully comprehend. The Pope, Clement V, found himself caught in the middle. A Frenchman himself, Clement had been elected to the papacy in 1305 under the shadow of Philip's influence. Though he recognized the Templars' service and legitimacy, he was politically vulnerable. Philip pressed him relentlessly, framing the order not merely as a threat to the crown but as a menace to the church itself. Clement's position was precarious. To resist Philip could provoke war, to acquiesce could stain the papacy. It was in this tense environment that a campaign was set in motion, one that would unfold with meticulous planning and chilling efficiency. The stage for the Templars' arrest was prepared with a combination of timing, secrecy, and deception. Philip orchestrated a coordinated sweep across France, issuing secret orders to the king's officials. On the morning of October 13th, 1307, at dawn, hundreds of Templars were arrested simultaneously in their commanderies. Knights were seized in their beds, beaten, and interrogated. Some resisted briefly, but the element of surprise was overwhelming. Many were forced to confess to charges that were likely fabricated: heresy, sodomy, idolatry, and corruption. Under the strain of torture, confessions were extracted. Yet the full extent of their supposed crimes was inconsistent, suggesting coercion rather than truth. Even as the arrests took place, the public narrative was carefully controlled. Philip's chroniclers depicted the Templars as corrupt and dangerous, a shadow over France that needed to be purged. The language of fear and betrayal dominated the story. The knights were accused of secret worship and subversion, of turning the sacred into the profane. To the populace, the arrests appeared righteous, almost divinely sanctioned. Philip's power was absolute, and the Templars, for all their martial prowess and secrecy, were caught off guard by the precision of the king's campaign. The seizure of the Templars' treasure added another layer to the drama. Philip had long coveted their wealth, and the timing of the arrests allowed him to take control of estates, gold, and documents. Yet when royal agents entered the vaults, they found less than expected. Ships had sailed, treasures had been hidden, and records had been altered. The Templars had prepared for this moment, just as they had planned for centuries of uncertainty. Their disappearance of assets hinted at knowledge beyond ordinary calculation, strategic foresight that suggested an awareness of both human greed and political vulnerability. In Paris, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Order, was seized with dignity. He was a man of nearly 70, seasoned by decades of war, diplomacy, and monastic discipline. When confronted by the king's agents, he reportedly asked simply, "By whose command?" His calm defiance, even in the face of impending imprisonment and torture, became legendary. It underscored a central truth about the Templars. Their power was as much moral and psychological as it was material. The knights' unwavering loyalty to their vows and to each other made them a formidable institution, one that could not be easily dismantled by force alone. The months that followed were a mixture of political maneuvering and public spectacle. Trials were held, confessions were coerced, and the order's reputation was systematically destroyed. Yet even as the Templars fell under accusation, their legacy of organization, discipline, and secrecy remained. Their commanderies continued to operate in shadow. Some wealth escaped the king's grasp, and hints of the order's deeper purpose, knowledge, relics, and hidden codes, persisted. Philip could seize lands and gold, but he could not erase the enigma that had defined the Templars for centuries. The arrest of the order marked a turning point not only for the Templars but for Europe itself. It revealed the precarious balance between power, wealth, and secrecy, and demonstrated how fear and envy could overturn even the most disciplined institution. The events of 1307 were dramatic, calculated, and ruthless, a masterclass in political subterfuge. Yet they also exposed a deeper truth. The Templars were not destroyed because of their sins, real or imagined, but because their very existence challenged the traditional structures of authority. Their independence, discipline, and secret knowledge made them a threat that kings and popes alike could not tolerate. Even in captivity, the Templars maintained their resolve. Jacques de Molay and other leaders refused to betray their brothers or disclose the order's secrets. Their silence became both a symbol of courage and a point of frustration for their captors. It suggested that the order's strength was not merely in arms or wealth, but in the unbreakable cohesion of its members. This cohesion, cultivated over nearly 2 centuries, would ensure that the Templar story endured long after the final flames consumed their leaders. In the end, the arrests of October 1307 were not merely a political act. They were the opening of a chapter that transformed the Templars from warriors of Christendom into legends shrouded in mystery. From the streets of Paris to the far reaches of Europe, the order's disappearance created a vacuum filled with rumor, intrigue, and speculation. Scholars, chroniclers, and storytellers began to ask the question that would echo for centuries. What secret had been so powerful that kings and popes felt compelled to destroy those who held it? It is this question that defines the story of the Templars. Their rise, their influence, and ultimately, their fall. The Knights' extraordinary discipline, wealth, and secrecy made them both invincible and vulnerable, admired and feared. Their disappearance in 1307 was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of a legend that would survive centuries, whispered in shadows, encoded in architecture, and immortalized in the imagination of generations who sought to uncover the hidden truths of the order. Even before the Templars were officially condemned, the rumblings of their enemies had begun to shape a narrative that would justify the most audacious act of betrayal in medieval history. Philip IV of France had carefully constructed a web of intrigue, whispering accusations into the ears of both the church and the populace. The charges were dramatic: heresy, blasphemy, idol worship, corruption, and secret rituals so vile that they threatened the very moral fabric of Christendom. Yet beneath these sensational claims lay a far more pragmatic motive: control. The Templars' wealth, independence, and secrecy were intolerable to a king whose power relied on dominance over every aspect of his realm. Philip's campaign was as much about fear and envy as it was about justice, and he executed it with precision. The arrests of October 13, 1307, were only the opening act. Once the knights were in custody, Philip and his agents set about extracting confessions. Torture was systematic, brutal, and relentless. Knights were stretched on the rack, burned at the feet, or subjected to starvation and deprivation. The methods were designed not merely to inflict pain, but to break the spirit and force admissions that could be used to legitimize the king's campaign. Many knights, unwilling to betray their brothers or compromise the order, initially resisted. Yet under unimaginable duress, even the strongest among them began to yield, producing confessions that were at once contradictory, bizarre, and horrifying. One recurring accusation involved the worship of an idol called Baphomet, described variously as a severed head, a pagan god, or a symbolic representation of the devil. Knights allegedly kissed the idol during secret ceremonies and renounced Christ in whispered vows. Other charges included sodomy, blasphemy, and ritualized secrecy meant to bind the members together against external authority. Contemporary historians debate the veracity of these claims, and many scholars suggest they were fabricated or coerced. Yet to the people of France, who had long revered and feared the Templars, these accusations were damning. The narrative was carefully constructed to depict the order as both corrupt and dangerous, a heretical force masquerading as holy warriors. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, remained central to Philip's campaign. A man of unwavering discipline and deep faith, de Molay refused to admit guilt. Even under torture, he maintained the order's code of silence, demonstrating the extraordinary loyalty and cohesion that had defined the Templars for nearly 2 centuries. Chroniclers of the time describe him as dignified and stoic, a figure whose presence commanded both respect and unease. His refusal to capitulate frustrated Philip and his agents, yet it also added a layer of complexity to the proceedings. Here was a man who embodied the ideals of the order even as the world around him sought to destroy those ideals entirely. The trials were a mixture of spectacle and strategy. Public hearings were held to display the Templars' supposed guilt, with confessions read aloud and details of their secret rituals described in vivid, often lurid detail. These sessions were designed to shock and terrify, ensuring that the populace would support, or at least accept, the king's actions. Philip's goal was not simply to punish the Templars. It was to delegitimize them entirely. By framing the order as heretical, he sought to erase their moral authority, strip them of their lands and wealth, and secure his own dominance over both church and state. Yet, for all the apparent triumph, the proceedings revealed cracks in Philip's strategy. Not all knights confessed, and some escaped to other regions, carrying with them the knowledge and loyalty of the order. In addition, the papacy under Clement V was hesitant to endorse the king's actions fully. Clement was acutely aware of the Templars' service to Christendom, and while politically constrained by Philip's influence, he could not entirely disregard the evidence, or lack thereof. This tension between the French crown and the papacy added a layer of intrigue to the trials, highlighting the delicate balance of power in medieval Europe. The confiscation of Templar assets was another critical element of the campaign. Philip's agents entered the order's castles, preceptories, and vaults, seizing gold, jewels, and documents. Yet, as expected, the Templars had anticipated such a move. Significant portions of treasure and records were already hidden, relocated, or disguised. Ships bearing wealth had sailed to foreign ports, and preceptories in distant lands operated under instructions designed to obscure their holdings. The extent of the Templars' foresight reinforced the perception that the order was not merely wealthy, but cunningly prepared for adversity. Even in apparent defeat, they retained control over elements of their empire, a testament to centuries of discipline, secrecy, and strategic planning. The combination of coerced confessions, theatrical trials, and asset seizure created a public perception of total collapse. For ordinary citizens, the Templars were no longer a respected order of knights. They were heretics and criminals, a danger that had been neutralized by the king's decisive action. Yet behind the scenes, the reality was far more complex. Many Templars continued to live, their knowledge, loyalty, and networks intact. While the public spectacle suggested annihilation, the order's deeper mission, the preservation of secret knowledge, sacred relics, and organizational structure, remained at least partially protected. Jacques de Molay's imprisonment exemplified the tension between public and private realities. Confined in Paris and later in other locations, he endured harsh conditions, yet he remained resolute. Historical accounts describe him refusing to betray his brothers or divulge the order's secrets, even when confronted with the threat of death. His defiance became a symbol, both for contemporaries and for future generations, of the Templars' resilience and the depth of their internal cohesion. It was a quiet, moral victory within an otherwise devastating political defeat. The aftermath of the arrests and trials also sparked intrigue and speculation across Europe. Stories spread of hidden treasuries, secret passages, and Templars who escaped to distant lands. Legends arose that the order had preserved knowledge from the Temple Mount, relics of Christ, or documents revealing truths that could shake the Church. These tales, whether founded or fanciful, contributed to the enduring aura of mystery surrounding the Templars. Even as the king sought to erase their influence, the perception of their hidden power persisted. The campaign against the Templars in France would become a blueprint for how fear, envy, and political calculation could dismantle even the most disciplined institution. By combining legal manipulation, public spectacle, coercion, and the seizure of wealth, Philip IV demonstrated how a monarch could neutralize a perceived threat without facing open military conflict. Yet in doing so, he also amplified the legend of the Templars. Their apparent fall became a narrative of martyrdom, secrecy, and hidden truth, a story that would capture imaginations for centuries. Ultimately, the 1307 arrests were both an ending and a beginning. They marked the collapse of the Templars' overt power in France and the loss of much of their wealth. Yet they also set the stage for a legend that transcended politics and geography. The Knights' unwavering discipline, loyalty, and secrecy ensured that the order's influence could not be entirely erased. The charges, trials, and public humiliation created a dramatic spectacle, but the Templars' deeper mission, whatever it truly was, continued to resonate, hidden in shadows, whispered in rumor, and encoded in symbols and architecture across Europe. The question that arose from this period remains haunting. What secret had provoked kings, corrupted courts, and led to the orchestrated destruction of an order that had served Christendom faithfully for nearly 2 centuries? Was it merely wealth that Philip coveted, or knowledge so powerful that it threatened the very foundations of authority in Europe? The answer, obscured by time, is part of the enduring mystery of the Templars, a puzzle that continues to fascinate scholars, historians, and seekers of hidden truth to this day. The months following the mass arrests of 1307 were marked by uncertainty, fear, and a slow unraveling of an order that had seemed untouchable for centuries. Across France, the Templars who had once been respected and revered were now pariahs, accused of heresy, corruption, and blasphemy. Their castles were seized, their treasures looted, and their knights imprisoned. Yet even as the French crown celebrated its apparent triumph, the story of the Templars was far from over. Behind the surface of coercion and spectacle, a deeper struggle was unfolding, one that would reveal both the resilience of the order and the fragility of human institutions when confronted with secrecy and power. The trials of the Templars were conducted with meticulous planning. Philip IV had orchestrated a system in which the charges against the knights could be repeated, reinforced, and broadcast to the public. Confessions, often obtained under torture, were written and disseminated to ensure that the narrative of guilt took root. These confessions were inconsistent, sometimes contradictory, yet they served the king's purpose perfectly. The public saw not nuance or doubt, but clear evidence of corruption and heresy. Even the most faithful knights found themselves trapped in a legal and political apparatus designed to destroy not just individuals, but the reputation of the order itself. Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master, became the focal point of this ordeal. Held in isolation and subjected to both physical and psychological pressure, he remained steadfast. Chroniclers recount that even when faced with the threat of execution, he refused to betray his brothers or reveal the order's secrets. His resistance was both extraordinary and deeply symbolic. For de Molay, the Templars' mission, whatever its ultimate purpose, was sacred, and no worldly threat could compel him to compromise it. This defiance became a powerful counter-narrative, one that would resonate long after the flames of Paris consumed him. The charges leveled against the Templars were as sensational as they were improbable. The supposed worship of the Baphomet, secret oaths renouncing Christ, and ritualized blasphemy were meant to shock and terrify. They painted the order as not just corrupt, but fundamentally dangerous, capable of undermining the moral and spiritual foundations of Europe. Yet modern scholarship suggests that these accusations were largely fabricated or extracted through coercion. The reality of Templar practice was far more disciplined, austere, and oriented toward service and protection than their accusers would admit. Nevertheless, the power of rumor and spectacle cannot be underestimated. To a medieval populace, fear often outweighed reason, and the Templars' mystique made them especially vulnerable to slander. The legal apparatus used against the order was a study in manipulation. Philip leveraged both secular and ecclesiastical authority to legitimize his campaign. He pressured Pope Clement V to sanction the arrests, framing the Templars not merely as criminals, but as enemies of God. This interplay between crown and papacy highlighted a critical vulnerability. Even an institution as powerful as the Templars was dependent, in part, on the goodwill or at least the tolerance of those above it. When the papacy could be swayed, manipulated, or intimidated, the Templars' immunity evaporated almost overnight. Despite the outward appearance of collapse, the Templars maintained elements of resilience. Some knights escaped to other countries, carrying with them knowledge, wealth, and the loyalty of the order. Hidden treasures were relocated, documents disguised or encoded, and distant preceptories continued to function semi-independently. The order's network had been designed for such eventualities, allowing it to endure even when faced with coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. It was a testament to the strategic foresight of the Templars' leaders, who had long understood that power alone was insufficient. Secrecy, discipline, and adaptability were equally crucial for survival. The imprisonment and eventual execution of de Molay added a grim, almost mythic dimension to the Templars' story. On March 18, 1314, he was burned at the stake in Paris, along with Geoffroy de Charny, another senior knight. Chroniclers describe de Molay as facing the flames with remarkable composure, reportedly calling out a curse upon King Philip and Pope Clement before his death. Whether or not these words were uttered exactly as recorded, the narrative crystallized a powerful image. A leader of immense moral authority and unbroken will confronting the forces arrayed against him with courage and dignity. This final act of defiance transformed de Molay into both a martyr and a symbol of the order's enduring mystery. Even as the executions proceeded, the Templars' legacy persisted. The castles, preceptories, and fortresses they had built across Europe did not vanish. Many were absorbed by other religious or military institutions, but the architectural genius, strategic positioning, and symbolic designs remained. Likewise, the Order's financial networks, though disrupted, had left a mark on medieval Europe. The system of letters of credit, coded communication, and secure transfer of wealth had set precedents that would influence banking and commerce for generations. In a sense, the Templars could not be entirely erased. Their influence was woven into the fabric of European society. Rumors and legends also flourished in the wake of their fall. Stories of hidden treasures, secret archives, and knowledge preserved for centuries circulated widely. Some claimed that the Templars had transported sacred relics, such as the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, to secure locations hidden from kings and popes alike. Others suggested that the Order had encoded esoteric wisdom into architecture, symbols, and manuscripts scattered across Europe. Whether true or not, these tales reinforced the aura of the Templars as custodians of mysteries too potent to be revealed, and they laid the foundation for centuries of speculation, conspiracy theories, and historical intrigue. The collapse of the Templars also underscored a broader truth about power and secrecy. Institutions that operate beyond ordinary accountability can accumulate enormous influence, yet that same autonomy makes them targets when fear, envy, or ambition converge. The Order's strength, their discipline, secrecy, and loyalty, was precisely what rendered them vulnerable in a political landscape dominated by kings and popes. Their downfall was not the result of military defeat, but of human fear, ambition, and the manipulation of perception. Yet in this vulnerability lies the paradox of the Templars. Their visible collapse only magnified their mystique. The more absolute their defeat appeared, the more compelling their legend became. Centuries later, historians, writers, and seekers of hidden truths would return to their story, piecing together fragments of architecture, manuscripts, and oral tradition to try to reconstruct a narrative that had been deliberately obscured. The Templars' fall, in essence, ensured that their legacy would endure far beyond the temporal constraints of kings, popes, or empires. The trials and executions of 1307 to 1314, therefore, were not merely historical events. They were the forging of a myth. The Templars had been destroyed as a political and military institution, yet in their moral courage, secrecy, and enduring influence, they had become something more enduring. They were now a symbol of the tension between visible authority and hidden knowledge, between power wielded openly and power preserved in shadow. The story of the Order, and particularly the final defiance of de Molay, created a narrative that would captivate imaginations for centuries, inspiring questions that continue to resonate. What secrets did they hold, and what truths remain hidden, waiting to be rediscovered? Even after the execution of Jacques de Molay and the apparent dissolution of the Knights Templar, the echoes of their presence continued to reverberate across Europe, leaving questions that no king, pope, or chronicler could fully answer. The dramatic fall of an order that had once seemed untouchable created a vacuum, not only in political and financial structures but also in the imagination of contemporaries. Who were these men really, and what were they protecting? The narrative of heresy and corruption imposed by Philip IV obscured the deeper reality. The Templars had been custodians of a carefully guarded legacy, one that transcended mere military or financial power, and whose secrets were designed to survive the Order itself. The mythos of the Templars grew in the decades following their downfall, fueled by rumor, legend, and the fragments of truth that survived. Tales spread of knights who had escaped the king's purges, carrying with them relics of unimaginable significance. Some claimed that the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or other sacred treasures had been secreted away in remote strongholds, monasteries, or even hidden beneath the streets of European cities. These stories, whether factual or imagined, served to reinforce the idea that the Templars were not merely a failed military order but guardians of knowledge and power beyond ordinary comprehension. Their disappearance, far from signaling the end, became the beginning of a legend that would endure for centuries. The secrecy that had protected the order during its rise became a tool of survival in the aftermath of their suppression. Preceptories that had existed across France, Spain, Portugal, and Italy had maintained hidden compartments, coded archives, and concealed treasures. Some of these holdings were quietly absorbed by sympathetic religious institutions or local nobles who recognized the significance of what they held. Others vanished entirely, leaving only tantalizing hints of extraordinary wealth and wisdom. The dispersal of these resources contributed to the enduring mystery. If Philip IV had seized their estates, how much had he truly captured, and how much remained hidden, waiting to be discovered? The Templars' financial networks, which had once made them indispensable to kings and merchants, did not entirely collapse. Letters of credit secured transport of wealth, and trusted intermediaries allowed portions of their treasure to be relocated across borders. In some cases, funds were transferred to distant commanderies or allied orders, such as the Knights Hospitaller. The sophistication of their banking operations had been a key element of their power, and it became a mechanism for survival in a time of persecution. The Order's ability to plan for contingencies over decades was a testament to their foresight and discipline, qualities that had made them both respected and feared during their ascendancy. Perhaps most intriguing is the suggestion, supported by scattered contemporary records, that the Templars had preserved knowledge from the East, texts, manuscripts, and relics that were considered dangerous or heretical by the Church. Some of these documents may have contained ancient wisdom, religious interpretations, or practical knowledge of trade, navigation, and science. Chroniclers hint at libraries hidden within Templar fortresses and preceptories, protected by secret chambers and encoded instructions. If even a fraction of this knowledge survived, it would explain why kings like Philip IV feared the Order so deeply. Their value lay not only in material wealth but in the power to influence thought, belief, and understanding. The legend of the Templars was further amplified by the enigmatic character of Jacques de Molay. His martyrdom became a symbol of unbroken faith, loyalty, and courage in the face of overwhelming power. Stories circulated that on the pyre, de Molay cursed both Philip IV and Pope Clement V, predicting that they would die within the year, a prophecy that, curiously, appeared to come true. Whether historical fact or embellishment, the narrative cemented de Molay as a figure larger than life, embodying the very secrecy, defiance, and moral authority that defined the Templars. His memory became a cornerstone in the mythology that sustained the Order's legacy long after its physical structures were dismantled. Beyond the stories of treasure and relics, the Templars' architectural and symbolic legacy remained potent. Gothic cathedrals, fortified castles, and even village chapels bore signs, symbols, and geometric patterns that some researchers speculate were influenced by Templar design principles. Hidden meanings, astronomical alignments, and coded inscriptions suggest that the Order encoded knowledge into their buildings, ensuring that even if they were destroyed, pieces of their understanding could survive for future generations. The very stones of Europe, in a sense, became repositories of the Templars' secret mission. The fascination with the Templars was not limited to Europe's elite. Common people, living in proximity to preceptories or hearing stories of miraculous deeds, also contributed to the growing mystique. Tales of knights appearing unscathed from impossible battles, of hidden passages and treasures, and of the Order's ability to move across kingdoms without detection spread through oral tradition. These stories blurred the line between history and legend, transforming the Templars into figures of myth, capable of shaping imagination as much as politics or finance. This period also illustrates a paradox. The Templars' downfall made their story more enduring. A secret organization, by nature, survives best when it cannot be fully exposed. By forcing the Order into persecution and public trial, Philip IV inadvertently ensured that its legend would endure. Every act of coercion, every seizure of wealth, every execution contributed to the narrative of mystery, martyrdom, and hidden knowledge. The more the Order was attacked, the more its story fascinated chroniclers, scholars, and storytellers, laying the foundation for centuries of speculation. The suppression of the Templars also influenced other religious and military institutions. Orders like the Hospitallers absorbed some former Templar assets and even personnel, ensuring that elements of Templar knowledge, discipline, and networks were preserved. In addition, the Church itself became more cautious about endorsing independent institutions with autonomous wealth and influence, recognizing the potential threat to its authority. The Templars' story became both a cautionary tale and a template for how secrecy, organization, and perceived autonomy could attract fear and persecution. Even in exile or obscurity, Templar influence persisted. Rumors of hidden sanctuaries, coded manuscripts, and secret allegiances suggested that the Order's mission had not been entirely extinguished. Some historians speculate that former Templars contributed to the spread of knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, and navigation, influencing the intellectual currents of Europe in subtle, untraceable ways. The Order's commitment to discipline, secrecy, and preservation of knowledge ensured that their legacy would ripple outward, far beyond the immediate political consequences of their suppression. In the centuries that followed, the Templars became a symbol of the tension between visible authority and hidden knowledge. They embodied the paradox of power. That which is feared, misunderstood, or concealed often exerts influence far beyond its apparent reach. Scholars, mystics, and storytellers alike were captivated by the question that remained unanswered. What were the Templars truly protecting, and why did it inspire both devotion and terror? This unresolved question transformed the Order from a historical institution into a legend that continues to inspire curiosity, speculation, and investigation. The period after their suppression is essential for understanding the enduring fascination with the Templars. It was a time of dispersal, secrecy, and legend building, during which the Order's story shifted from that of an active military and financial institution to a narrative of hidden knowledge, moral courage, and unresolved mystery. Even in defeat, the Templars demonstrated the power of discipline, loyalty, and foresight. Their material structures could be seized, their wealth redistributed, and their leaders executed. Yet the ideas, knowledge, and myth they had cultivated proved far more resilient. Ultimately, the post-suppression era emphasizes that the Templars' greatest strength was not swords, castles, or gold. It was the cohesion of their mission, the discipline of their members, and the secrets they carried. These elements allowed the Order's influence to survive political and religious persecution, and they ensured that even centuries later, the story of the Templars would continue to fascinate, challenge, and inspire. The question of what they truly safeguarded, knowledge, relics, or something even more profound, remains the central mystery of their enduring legend, compelling generations to look beneath the surface of history in search of hidden truth. Even as the Templars' official presence was dismantled, whispers of their secrets persisted, spreading like a slow-burning ember across Europe. Their sudden and dramatic fall had created a vacuum not only in the political and financial landscape, but also in the collective imagination. People could not ignore the question that hovered in every court, monastery, and marketplace. What was it that the Templars had been guarding so fiercely that kings and popes had gone to such extraordinary lengths to destroy them? This question fueled speculation, rumor, and fear, shaping the legend of the Order for centuries to come. The dispersion of the Templars' surviving members contributed to the mystique. Many fled to neighboring kingdoms or distant lands, seeking refuge in castles, monasteries, and remote settlements. Some found sanctuary with sympathetic nobles, others with the Hospitallers or other military religious orders. These displaced knights carried with them not just knowledge, but the culture, discipline, and networks that had defined the Order. They became living repositories of the Templars' history, capable of preserving and transmitting secrets, and ensuring that the Order's influence did not vanish entirely with the loss of its castles and treasures. Among the surviving knights, there was a remarkable continuity of purpose. Even in exile, they maintained the vows of obedience, poverty, and secrecy that had bound them for generations. Their training in discipline, strategy, and covert operations allowed them to survive in hostile territories while keeping the Order's legacy intact. Oral tradition, encoded manuscripts, and carefully guarded relics were transported across borders, ensuring that the Templars' knowledge and influence were preserved in ways that were difficult to detect or disrupt. In some regions, these surviving knights are thought to have subtly influenced local politics, religious practices, and even economic networks, applying the Order's methods in smaller, less visible ways. The Templars' legendary treasures, whether mythic or real, contributed enormously to their enduring fascination. Chroniclers reported that vast hoards of gold, silver, and precious artifacts were hidden in secret locations, sometimes beneath castles or within remote forests. Some of these treasures were said to include sacred relics, objects linked to Christ, the Temple of Solomon, or other holy sites. Whether the treasures were recovered, lost, or destroyed is a matter of speculation. Yet the idea that such wealth and relics might still exist, concealed in secret chambers or underground vaults, captivated imaginations and inspired countless treasure hunts, myths, and conspiracy theories. The notion that the Templars had preserved forbidden knowledge added another layer to their mystique. Legends suggest that during their years in the Holy Land, the order had acquired manuscripts, scrolls, and oral traditions from both Islamic and Jewish scholars. Some of these texts may have contained ancient mathematical, astronomical, or philosophical knowledge, while others reportedly included religious or esoteric teachings that the Church considered dangerous. While much of this is speculation, the persistence of such stories suggests that contemporaries, and later generations, perceived the Templars as custodians of secrets too potent to be left unprotected. The architecture left behind by the Templars also hints at hidden purposes. Many preceptories, fortresses, and chapels constructed by the order display unusual geometric patterns, symbolic carvings, and architectural anomalies that some researchers believe encoded hidden knowledge. Certain fortresses were built with secret chambers, tunnels, and escape routes that could protect both people and treasures. The precision, design, and placement of these structures suggest an intentional effort to encode information in stone and spatial arrangement, a form of secrecy that could survive even the collapse of the order's public authority. The legend of the Templars was further strengthened by tales of their skill in strategy and foresight. Even after their suppression, stories circulated of knights who had anticipated the king's moves, protected hidden wealth, and ensured the survival of key knowledge. Their reputation for invincibility, developed during the Crusades, had already entered the realm of myth, and the dramatic fall in France only amplified it. The narrative of Templars as secret keepers of extraordinary wisdom and power became a story that transcended history, shaping literature, folklore, and later, popular imagination. It is also important to consider the psychological impact of the Templars' fall. Philip IV's campaign against them was unprecedented in scope and meticulous in execution, but it could not erase the human memory of the order's existence. Those who had interacted with the Templars, peasants, nobles, clergy, and pilgrims, retained recollections of the knight's discipline, courage, and mysterious aura. Memories of the order's fortresses, fleets, and wealth lingered in public consciousness, giving rise to speculation about secret treasures, hidden knowledge, and undiscovered preceptories. These lingering impressions ensured that the Templar story would persist long after the political realities of their suppression had faded. The survival of Templar influence also manifested in clandestine networks. Some scholars suggest that the dispersed knights maintained covert lines of communication, transmitting intelligence, financial information, and perhaps even esoteric knowledge across Europe. This network, though reduced in scope, may have allowed former Templars to remain engaged with the broader currents of political, economic, and religious life. The order's methods of secrecy and loyalty, honed over decades, made it possible to operate effectively even under extreme duress, preserving a shadow of the order's original mission. Another intriguing aspect of the post-suppression period is the adaptation of Templar methods and symbols by other groups. Some historians posit that Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other secret societies may have drawn inspiration, directly or indirectly, from Templar practices. Rituals, symbols, and codes associated with secrecy, loyalty, and moral discipline bear uncanny resemblance to what is known of the order's internal culture. While these connections remain speculative, they suggest that the Templars' influence extended beyond their immediate historical context, seeding ideas and traditions that would endure for centuries. The persistence of the Templars' legend underscores a fundamental truth about secrecy and power. That which is hidden often exerts influence far beyond its visible form. The order's fall, rather than marking the end of their relevance, amplified their mystique. Every confiscated treasure, coerced confession, and destroyed fortress became a chapter in a larger narrative of endurance, defiance, and mystery. In the eyes of contemporaries and future generations alike, the Templars had become more than a military or religious institution. They had become symbols of a hidden truth, guardians of knowledge, and exemplars of discipline and loyalty. Ultimately, the Templars' survival in exile, the dispersal of their knowledge, and the legends of hidden treasures ensured that their story would never fully die. Even as kings, popes, and chroniclers sought to erase them, the Order's influence persisted through secrecy, memory, and myth. Their discipline, foresight, and cohesion allowed them to endure in ways that purely temporal power could not achieve, creating a legacy that continues to captivate historians, researchers, and seekers of hidden truths to this day. The question that has haunted centuries remains: what were the Templars truly protecting, and how far-reaching was the impact of their secret mission? The story of the Templars after their suppression is inseparable from the myths and legends that emerged around their supposed secrets. While kings and popes sought to obliterate the Order, they could not erase the fascination, fear, and reverence that the Templars inspired. Their sudden disappearance left gaps in knowledge, unanswered questions, and tantalizing hints of hidden treasures, sacred relics, and forbidden knowledge. Across Europe, whispers of their survival, encoded manuscripts, and secret rituals persisted, fueling speculation for centuries. These stories transformed the Templars from a historical institution into an enduring symbol of mystery, courage, and secrecy. One of the most enduring aspects of the Templars' post-suppression legend is the idea that they had acquired knowledge and treasures during their time in the Holy Land, knowledge that the Church, kings, and even the general populace could not fully comprehend. Chronicles and later interpretations suggest that the Knights may have uncovered ancient texts, codices, or artifacts connected to the Temple of Solomon or other sacred sites. Some accounts hint at scrolls containing esoteric teachings, astronomical calculations, or mystical knowledge that challenged conventional religious interpretations. Whether fact or fiction, these narratives reinforce the perception that the Templars' mission had extended far beyond martial prowess or financial management, touching upon the preservation of profound and potentially dangerous truths. The Templars' dispersed members played a crucial role in maintaining the Order's legacy. Those who escaped imprisonment or execution carried with them both tangible and intangible assets. Some retained portions of hidden treasure, others preserved coded manuscripts or oral traditions. In exile, former knights continued to adhere to their vows of obedience and secrecy, creating a shadow network that spanned across Europe. These men were the custodians of the Order's memory, ensuring that even if public authority was lost, the Templars' mission could endure quietly, influencing events and preserving knowledge in subtle ways that would often evade historians' scrutiny. The legend of hidden treasure is among the most captivating elements of the Templar mythos. Chroniclers and later storytellers described vast hoards of gold, silver, and precious artifacts that had been secreted away in remote locations, inaccessible to the French crown. Some of these treasures were rumored to include sacred relics, potentially linked to Christ or the Temple of Solomon, which would have conferred spiritual and political significance beyond material value. The possibility that such treasures survived Philip Ivy's confiscations has inspired centuries of treasure hunts, speculation, and scholarly investigation, keeping the Templars alive in the imagination long after their apparent fall. Equally compelling are the theories regarding the preservation of esoteric knowledge. It has been suggested that during their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Templars acquired not only material wealth but intellectual and spiritual treasures as well. They may have collected manuscripts from Islamic scholars, Jewish mystics, and early Christian sources, gaining insights into mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy that were rare in medieval Europe. Some historians propose that the Order's architectural feats, fortresses, chapels, and preceptories, encoded aspects of this knowledge in geometry, orientation, and symbolic carvings, creating a tangible record that could survive even when the members themselves were persecuted. The dispersion of Templar members also facilitated the subtle transmission of ideas into other institutions. The Hospitallers absorbed some former knights and assets, while sympathetic nobles may have hidden portions of the Order's wealth and knowledge. Additionally, there are tantalizing but controversial theories connecting the Templars to later secret societies, including Freemasonry and Rosicrucian movements. Rituals, Symbols and ethical codes found in these societies sometimes bear resemblance to what is known of the Templars' internal practices. While direct connections remain speculative, the possibility suggests that elements of Templar philosophy and discipline could have been preserved and adapted across centuries, ensuring that the order's influence extended far beyond its temporal existence. The psychological impact of the Templars' fall cannot be overstated. Their sudden and dramatic suppression created a sense of both fear and awe. Ordinary citizens, having witnessed the arrests, trials, and executions, could not fully comprehend the reasons for the king's actions, and their imaginations filled the gaps. Stories of miraculous escapes, hidden treasures, and secret missions proliferated, blending fact with legend. The Templars became a symbol of hidden power and moral courage, representing an ideal that was simultaneously inspiring and terrifying. The architecture left behind by the Templars served as another enduring testament to their legacy. Castles, fortresses, and chapels often incorporated unusual geometric patterns, hidden chambers, and symbolic carvings. Scholars have long debated whether these elements were purely practical or encoded with deeper meaning. Some suggest that they functioned as repositories of knowledge or safe storage for valuable artifacts, while others argue that they represented spiritual or philosophical teachings, subtly embedded in stone and mortar. Whatever the purpose, these constructions reinforced the aura of mystery surrounding the order and provided physical evidence of their sophistication, discipline, and foresight. Another key element of the post-suppression period is the persistence of coded communication. The Templars were known for their meticulous record-keeping and the use of ciphers and cryptic symbols to protect sensitive information. Even after the fall of the order, some of these codes survived in manuscripts, letters, and architectural inscriptions. The ability to convey messages and preserve knowledge without detection was a hallmark of the order's operational genius and a primary reason why their influence could persist despite political and religious persecution. The trials and public condemnation of the Templars paradoxically enhanced their mystique. By portraying the knights as heretics and criminals, Philip IV inadvertently amplified the sense of hidden power. People assumed that an institution that inspired such fear must have been extraordinary. The narrative of martyrdom, combined with tales of secret knowledge and hidden treasures, created a legend that would endure for centuries. In this way, the Templars' public destruction functioned as a kind of myth-making, ensuring that curiosity, speculation, and reverence would persist long after the order ceased to exist in its original form. Furthermore, the Templars' commitment to secrecy and discipline provided a blueprint for resilience. Even under extreme persecution, their cohesion and loyalty allowed them to maintain control over knowledge and resources. These qualities ensured that the order's mission, whatever its ultimate scope, could survive in fragmentary form. The dispersed knights, treasures, and manuscripts created a shadow network that subtly influenced events, education, and the transmission of knowledge across Europe. In this sense, the Templars' power did not vanish with the confiscation of estates or the execution of leaders. It merely shifted into hidden channels. The enduring fascination with the Templars also reflects a broader human tendency to revere secrecy and moral courage. The knights' discipline, bravery, and loyalty under unimaginable pressure became a template for heroism and steadfastness. Their story resonates because it combines historical reality with the allure of the unknown. An elite, disciplined order, suddenly uprooted, yet leaving traces of extraordinary knowledge and power that may still lie hidden. This combination of historical fact, moral drama, and potential hidden truth creates a narrative that is irresistible to historians, writers, and seekers of mystery alike. Ultimately, the post-suppression era transformed the Templars from a concrete institution into a legend of enduring power, secrecy, and intrigue. Their legacy was preserved through surviving knights, hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, architectural feats, and the stories passed down through generations. These elements ensured that the order's influence did not disappear, but instead became layered with myth, speculation, and mystery. The question that continues to captivate scholars and enthusiasts alike, what were the Templars truly guarding, remains unresolved, ensuring that their story continues to inspire curiosity, investigation, and fascination even 7 centuries after their apparent fall. The legacy of the Knights Templar after their official dissolution is a study in resilience, adaptation, and enduring mystery. Though their formal structures had been dismantled, and their leaders executed or imprisoned, the order's influence persisted in ways that were subtle yet profound. Across Europe, former knights, loyal supporters, and sympathetic nobles became custodians of their secrets, safeguarding knowledge, treasures, and traditions that Philip IV and his allies had sought to eradicate. The Templars' disappearance did not signify the end of their mission. Rather, it marked the beginning of a hidden chapter, one that would ripple through history, inspiring fascination, speculation, and legend for centuries to come. One of the most remarkable aspects of this post-dissolution period was the ability of former Templars to maintain cohesion despite persecution and exile. Many fled to neighboring kingdoms, the Iberian Peninsula, or even as far as Scotland and the Holy Roman Empire, taking with them not only fragments of treasure but also the organizational culture, discipline, and codes that had defined the order for nearly 2 centuries. These dispersed knights remained committed to their vows of obedience, secrecy, and loyalty, creating a shadow network that allowed the order's mission to persist even when its formal presence had been obliterated. The survival of Templar knowledge was closely tied to the preservation of manuscripts, maps, and coded records. During their years in the Holy Land, the Templars had accumulated a vast store of intellectual and religious materials, texts that ranged from military manuals to esoteric writings, and possibly even documents of profound spiritual significance. After their suppression, many of these texts were hidden in secret compartments, transported to remote locations, or encoded in ways that only members of the order could interpret. This meticulous safeguarding suggests that the Templars were not merely warriors or financiers, but custodians of information deemed too powerful, dangerous, or sacred to be left exposed to the world. The mythos surrounding the Templars' treasures is a cornerstone of their enduring legend. Chroniclers and later storytellers suggested that vast stores of gold, silver, and precious relics had been spirited away before Philip IV could seize them. Some accounts hint at items of immense spiritual or symbolic value, potentially including the Holy Grail, fragments of the True Cross, or objects linked to the Temple of Solomon. While the veracity of these claims remains a matter of debate, the persistence of such stories underscores the perception that the order's value lay not merely in wealth but in guardianship of extraordinary artifacts and knowledge. The very idea of hidden treasure has inspired centuries of exploration, speculation, and artistic imagination. Beyond material wealth, the Templars' influence extended to architectural and symbolic legacies. Fortresses, castles, and chapels constructed by the order often incorporated geometric designs, hidden chambers, and symbolic carvings that some researchers suggest encoded esoteric knowledge. Certain structures were aligned with astronomical phenomena, perhaps reflecting a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and sacred geometry. These architectural feats ensured that even in the order's absence, traces of their knowledge and worldview persisted in the physical landscape, waiting to be deciphered by those perceptive enough to notice. The psychological impact of the Templars' fall also contributed to their enduring mystique. The dramatic arrests, public trials, and executions created an aura of both fear and awe. Common people, nobles, and clergy alike were captivated by the story of a once powerful order brought low by the machinations of kings and popes. Rumors of miraculous escapes, hidden vaults, and secret missions proliferated, blending historical reality with legend. The Templars became archetypal figures in the collective imagination. Disciplined, courageous, and enigmatic, operating in a moral and operational sphere that few could fully comprehend. Dispersed Templar members also played a role in influencing other institutions. The Hospitallers, who absorbed some former knights, inherited not only personnel but also organizational methods, financial expertise, and strategic thinking. Some historians suggest that these ex-Templars contributed to innovations in fortification, banking, and logistics, subtly transmitting the order's influence into other domains. In this way, even after their formal suppression, the Templars' operational genius continued to shape military, religious, and economic structures in Europe. The question of secret knowledge is central to understanding the Templars' post-dissolution legacy. Many legends suggest that the Order had access to ancient wisdom, mystical texts, or strategic insights that could destabilize conventional power structures. Some theories posit that they discovered hidden chambers beneath Jerusalem's Temple Mount or acquired manuscripts containing lost knowledge of religious, scientific, or philosophical significance. Whether fact or exaggeration, these narratives reinforce the perception of the Templars as custodians of extraordinary power, elevating them from a military order to a symbol of hidden truth and intellectual guardianship. The spread of Templar symbols and codes into later secret societies is another fascinating dimension. Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism, and other esoteric organizations contain elements that resemble Templar rituals, symbols, and ethical frameworks. While definitive proof of direct lineage remains elusive, the parallels suggest that the Order's influence may have been transmitted in subtle, symbolic ways, extending their cultural and intellectual impact far beyond the medieval period. The Templars' emphasis on discipline, secrecy, and moral conduct provided a template that could survive in hidden or symbolic forms for centuries. Stories of the Templars' hidden treasures, secret knowledge, and covert influence also fueled the imagination of explorers, scholars, and mystics. From Renaissance thinkers to modern-day historians, writers, and conspiracy theorists, the Templars became a lens through which to explore questions of power, faith, and human ambition. Their legacy illustrates how secrecy and discipline can amplify the impact of an institution, transforming what was once a temporal organization into a symbol that resonates across time and geography. Moreover, the Templars' ability to preserve cohesion under extreme adversity is instructive. Even when their castles were seized, their leaders executed, and their wealth confiscated, the Order's values, strategies, and networks endured. This resilience underscores a crucial principle. The most enduring forms of influence are often intangible, transmitted through loyalty, knowledge, and disciplined practice rather than raw power or material assets. The Templars' example demonstrates that what is preserved in memory, culture, and secret tradition can outlast even the most ruthless political campaigns. The combination of material treasures, hidden knowledge, architectural sophistication, and disciplined networks ensured that the Templars' story remained alive, even in the centuries following their suppression. They became a symbol of the tension between visible authority and hidden power, demonstrating that influence need not always be public to be profound. Every rumor of treasure, coded manuscript, or surviving knight added layers to the mythos, ensuring that the Templars would continue to captivate historians, writers, and the public imagination alike. Ultimately, the post-dissolution legacy of the Knights Templar is a testament to the enduring power of secrecy, loyalty, and disciplined purpose. Though their visible institutions were dismantled, the Order's influence persisted through surviving members, hidden treasures, preserved knowledge, and enduring myths. The Templars' story demonstrates how an institution can transcend its temporal limits, evolving from a historical entity into a symbol of hidden wisdom, moral courage, and enduring mystery. The question of what they truly safeguarded, whether knowledge, relics, or a combination of both, remains one of history's most compelling enigmas, ensuring that the Templars' legacy continues to intrigue and inspire even 7 centuries after their fall. The years following the official suppression of the Knights Templar are perhaps the most enigmatic in the Order's long history, a period in which their influence shifted from visible power to hidden networks, secret knowledge, and enduring legend. Though Philip IV and Pope Clement V had orchestrated the dismantling of the Order, the Templars' mission, discipline, and knowledge could not be entirely eradicated. Survivors continued to move in the shadows, safeguarding relics, encoded manuscripts, and the ethical and operational frameworks that had defined the Order. Their story during this era is not one of defeat but of transformation, as the Templars evolved from a political and military power into symbols of mystery, resilience, and enduring influence. One of the most compelling elements of this period is the dispersal of the surviving knights. Many fled France, seeking refuge in Spain, Portugal, Scotland, and parts of the Holy Roman Empire. They carried with them fragments of treasure, vital knowledge, and the loyalty of those who had not been captured. These men became the living repositories of the Order's culture and traditions, preserving practices that had been honed over decades of discipline, war, and devotion. Their ability to maintain cohesion in exile demonstrates the extraordinary organizational strength of the Templars, who could operate as a decentralized yet unified force even in the most hostile environments. The Templars' treasures, both material and symbolic, continued to fuel speculation and legend. Chronicles, letters, and later accounts hint at vast stores of gold, silver, jewels, and sacred relics hidden in secret locations across Europe and possibly the Holy Land. Some of these treasures were allegedly linked to the Holy Grail, fragments of the True Cross, or other objects of religious significance. While historians debate the veracity of these claims, the consistent recurrence of such stories underscores the perception that the Templars were custodians of objects too valuable, spiritually, politically, and materially, to be left in the hands of ordinary rulers. The very act of hiding such treasures implies a long-term vision, a strategic foresight that transcended immediate survival. Equally significant is the Templars' preservation of knowledge. During their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Order is believed to have acquired manuscripts, codices, and oral teachings from Islamic, Jewish, and Christian sources. These included not only theological texts but also practical knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, navigation, and military strategy. After their suppression, surviving members safeguarded these texts, often encoding them to prevent unauthorized access. In some cases, the knowledge may have been dispersed across Europe, integrated into other institutions, or preserved within sympathetic noble households. This careful management ensured that, even without formal power, the Templars' intellectual legacy endured. Architecture played a key role in the Templars' strategy for preserving influence. Fortresses, chapels, and preceptories often incorporated hidden chambers, secret passages, and symbolic carvings. Some scholars suggest that geometric patterns, celestial alignments, and encoded inscriptions embedded in Templar structures functioned as both protective measures and repositories of knowledge. These buildings, scattered across Europe and the Holy Land, became physical manifestations of the Order's foresight and discipline. Even when the Knights themselves were no longer present, their architectural legacy conveyed information, preserved secrets, and maintained a symbolic presence. The Templars' influence in exile also extended to other institutions. The Hospitallers absorbed some former Knights, incorporating their expertise in fortification, finance, and military operations. Sympathetic nobles and clergy occasionally provided sanctuary, protecting members and artifacts from persecution. In these ways, the Templars' methods and knowledge diffused subtly into the broader fabric of European political, military, and religious life. While the Order no longer existed as a formal entity, its operational principles and ethical frameworks persisted, quietly shaping developments in ways that would often go unnoticed. Legends surrounding the Templars' survival flourished during this era. Stories of secret preceptories, hidden treasure caches, and mystical knowledge became widespread, blending historical fact with imagination. The mysterious nature of their disappearance created a fertile environment for myth-making, as people speculated about what the Order had preserved and where it might still exist. Tales of knights appearing miraculously unscathed from battle, transporting treasures unseen, or encoding messages in stone and parchment further reinforced the aura of invincibility and secrecy. These narratives ensured that the Templars' influence continued to permeate both popular culture and elite circles of thought. The Templars' ethical and moral frameworks were another enduring aspect of their legacy. Even in exile, knights maintained vows of obedience, secrecy, and service. Their strict codes of conduct ensured loyalty, cohesion, and discipline, creating an internal structure capable of surviving extreme external pressures. This emphasis on moral integrity and collective responsibility not only preserved the Order's culture, but also contributed to the perception of the Templars as principled guardians of extraordinary knowledge and treasure. Their unwavering commitment to their mission, even in the absence of formal recognition, reinforced the idea that the Order's true power lay not in wealth or armies, but in the disciplined application of knowledge and values. The enduring fascination with the Templars during this period also had a psychological dimension. The dramatic collapse of an order that had seemed invincible inspired awe, fear, and admiration. Their sudden disappearance created a void that imagination and rumor sought to fill. Every story of hidden treasure, surviving knight, or secret ritual added layers to the mythos, ensuring that the Templars remained both a historical reality and a symbol of mystery. The tension between what was known, what was believed, and what was hidden created a narrative that captivated contemporaries and continues to enthrall modern audiences. The post-suppression period also highlights the Templars' strategic foresight. Their preparation for adversity, encoded documents, hidden chambers, dispersed members, and secret routes, allowed them to survive not just physically but culturally and intellectually. By anticipating persecution and planning for continuity, the Order demonstrated a level of organizational sophistication that was rare for its time. Their ability to endure under such extreme conditions reinforces the idea that the Templars were more than warriors or financiers. They were architects of resilience, capable of preserving influence long after their apparent defeat. Finally, this era cements the Templars' transformation from a tangible order into a symbol of hidden knowledge, moral courage, and enduring intrigue. Their physical structures, dispersed members, secret treasures, and encoded knowledge ensured that their influence extended far beyond the medieval period. Stories of their survival, whether factual or legendary, provided a narrative of resilience and secrecy that continues to inspire curiosity and scholarly investigation. The question of what the Templars truly safeguarded, knowledge, relics, or esoteric wisdom, remains unresolved, sustaining a sense of mystery that defines their enduring legacy. In essence, the post-suppression years reveal the Templars' greatest strength: the ability to preserve their mission, values, and influence even when stripped of visible power. Their story demonstrates that true legacy is not measured solely by material wealth or political authority, but by the capacity to endure in hidden networks, cultural memory, and intellectual influence. The Knights Templar, though officially dismantled, became eternal in their mystery, leaving a narrative that continues to challenge historians, inspire researchers, and capture the imagination of the world. The period following the fall of the Knights Templar is as enigmatic as it is fascinating. A time when the Order's visible power had been obliterated, yet its influence continued to ripple through Europe and beyond. While kings and popes believed they had extinguished a dangerous institution, the reality was far more complex. Dispersed knights, hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and secret traditions ensured that the Order's presence persisted in ways that were both subtle and enduring. This era illustrates a profound lesson about the resilience of knowledge, discipline, and human ingenuity. Even when crushed publicly, the Templars had prepared to endure in shadows, their mission preserved through secrecy, loyalty, and careful foresight. One of the most striking aspects of this period is the dispersion and adaptation of the surviving knights. Many fled to Spain and Portugal, where the Reconquista provided both opportunity and refuge. Others traveled to Scotland, the Holy Roman Empire, and even as far as the British Isles. These men carried with them fragments of treasure, coded documents, and the culture of the Order, including the discipline, strategic planning, and loyalty that had made the Templars so formidable. Their survival depended not only on cunning and courage but also on the networks and alliances they had cultivated during the Order's peak. This dispersion allowed the Templars to continue influencing events and preserving knowledge even without a centralized hierarchy or formal authority. The Templars' hidden treasures, both material and symbolic, played a central role in their continued influence. Contemporary chronicles and later traditions describe vast stores of gold, silver, jewels, and sacred relics that were concealed from the French crown. Some of these items were said to possess immense spiritual significance, including objects potentially linked to the Holy Grail, fragments of the True Cross, or artifacts from the Temple of Solomon. While the existence of such treasures is debated, the persistence of these stories underscores the perception that the Templars were guardians of extraordinary power, a role that extended beyond martial or financial expertise. The very act of hiding these treasures demonstrates strategic foresight. By securing them, the Order preserved both material wealth and a symbolic authority that could inspire loyalty and fear for generations. Equally important was the preservation of intellectual and esoteric knowledge. During their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Templars collected manuscripts, scrolls, and oral teachings from Islamic, Jewish, and Christian sources. These texts encompassed theological interpretations, philosophical insights, military strategies, and practical knowledge in astronomy, navigation, and engineering. After their suppression, surviving knights safeguarded this knowledge, often encoding it in ciphers, symbols, and architectural designs. By doing so, they ensured that even in exile, the Order's intellectual legacy could be transmitted securely, influencing other institutions, future scholars, and perhaps even secret societies centuries later. Architecture became a tangible medium through which the Templars preserved their influence. Castles, fortresses, and preceptories often featured hidden chambers, secret passageways, and symbolic carvings. Some buildings were aligned with astronomical phenomena, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and sacred geometry. Scholars speculate that these structures served as repositories for treasures, manuscripts, and encoded knowledge. Even in the absence of the knights themselves, these physical creations acted as enduring markers of Templar ingenuity and foresight, silently transmitting information and maintaining a symbolic presence that could survive political persecution. The Templars' ethical and operational frameworks further ensured the survival of their influence. Even in exile, knights adhered to vows of obedience, secrecy, and moral conduct. This discipline created cohesion among dispersed members, allowing them to operate effectively in hostile environments. Loyalty to the Order and its mission became a guiding principle, fostering networks of trust that extended across borders. These frameworks also reinforced the perception of the Templars as principled guardians, not merely of wealth or territory, but of knowledge and values considered too powerful or sacred to be left unprotected. The psychological and cultural impact of the Templars' fall cannot be overstated. Their dramatic suppression created a sense of awe and fear that lingered in the collective consciousness. Stories of miraculous escapes, hidden treasures, secret archives, and covert missions proliferated, blending historical fact with legend. These narratives transformed the Templars into archetypes of courage, loyalty, and secrecy, figures whose actions could inspire admiration and speculation long after their disappearance. The tension between the visible destruction of the Order and the unseen preservation of its mission created a compelling paradox that fueled centuries of fascination. The influence of the Templars in exile also manifested in the integration of former members into other institutions. The Hospitallers absorbed some knights, adopting their methods in fortification, logistics, and financial management. Sympathetic nobles provided sanctuary, hiding both individuals and treasures from persecution. In these ways, the Templars' knowledge, strategies, and operational excellence diffused subtly into European political, military, and economic structures. Even without a formal order, their legacy persisted through indirect influence, shaping developments in ways that were difficult to trace but nonetheless significant. The question of secret knowledge adds another layer to the Templars' post-suppression narrative. Legends suggest that they possessed esoteric texts, mystical teachings, and strategic insights that could alter religious, political, or scientific understanding. While the precise nature of this knowledge remains speculative, it is clear that contemporaries feared and revered the Order's intellectual and spiritual power. By encoding manuscripts, embedding information in architecture, and transmitting teachings orally, the Templars ensured that their wisdom could survive persecution. These efforts created a shadow network of knowledge, preserving elements of the Order's mission for future generations. Stories of hidden treasures and surviving knights during this period further cemented the Templars' mystique. Accounts of secret preceptories, concealed hoards, and miraculous rescues contributed to the perception that the Order's influence remained potent despite its formal demise. The combination of historical events, moral courage, and mystery created a narrative that resonated across centuries, inspiring writers, historians, and seekers of hidden truth alike. The Templars became emblematic of the tension between visible authority and concealed power, demonstrating that influence can endure in subtle, intangible ways. The Templars' post-suppression resilience also offers lessons in organizational foresight. By anticipating persecution, creating contingency plans, and maintaining discipline, they ensured that the Order's mission and influence could survive in exile. Their strategies illustrate that true power is often preserved not through domination or wealth alone, but through knowledge, cohesion, and the careful stewardship of resources. Even stripped of formal authority, the Order continued to exert an invisible yet profound impact on political, religious, and intellectual landscapes. Ultimately, the post-suppression years solidified the Templars' transformation from a military and religious institution into a symbol of hidden knowledge, moral integrity, and enduring mystery. Their dispersed members, hidden treasures, encoded knowledge, and architectural legacies ensured that their story would persist, inspiring fascination, speculation, and scholarly inquiry for centuries. The question of what the Templars truly safeguarded, be it relics, manuscripts, or esoteric wisdom, remains unresolved, sustaining a narrative of secrecy and intrigue that continues to captivate the world. The Knights Templar, though officially dismantled, proved that resilience, secrecy, and foresight can preserve influence far beyond the life of any institution, leaving a legacy that transcends history itself. The years following the collapse of the Knights Templar reveal a narrative of survival that is as intriguing as it is mysterious. Although the Order had been publicly dismantled, executed, and condemned, its influence did not disappear. Instead, it evolved into something more subtle, more enduring, and infinitely more enigmatic. Former knights, dispersed across Europe and beyond, became the custodians of a legacy that combined discipline, knowledge, and secrecy. They carried with them hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and a moral code that allowed the essence of the Templar mission to persist even without castles, armies, or formal authority. This period illustrates how an organization can transform adversity into a means of preservation, ensuring its legacy endures far longer than its visible power. The dispersal of surviving Templars was a key factor in the Order's post-suppression survival. Many sought refuge in Spain and Portugal, where the Reconquista created both the opportunity and need for experienced military orders. Others traveled to Scotland, the Holy Roman Empire, and even the British Isles, blending into local societies while maintaining the cohesion and traditions of the Order. These men acted as living repositories of Templar culture, safeguarding their knowledge and values while quietly influencing local politics and religious institutions. The ability to operate effectively in exile demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and foresight of the Templars, who had prepared for contingencies long before persecution arrived. Hidden treasures, both material and symbolic, were central to the Templars' enduring legend. Chroniclers and later accounts suggest that vast amounts of gold, silver, jewels, and sacred relics were secreted away before Philip IV could seize them. Some of these treasures were purportedly of immense spiritual significance, including relics connected to the Holy Grail, fragments of the True Cross, or artifacts from the Temple of Solomon. While the existence of these treasures remains a subject of debate, the consistency of such stories underscores the perception that the Templars were guardians of extraordinary power. By hiding these assets, they ensured both the preservation of wealth and the continuation of the Order's symbolic authority. Equally significant is the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. During their time in the Holy Land, the Templars acquired manuscripts, scrolls, and oral traditions from Jewish, Christian, and Islamic sources. These texts included not only military manuals but also philosophical, scientific, and esoteric writings that were considered rare or dangerous in medieval Europe. After the suppression of the Order, surviving knights safeguarded this knowledge, often encoding it in ciphers, hidden compartments, or architectural designs. By doing so, they ensured that even in the absence of formal organization, the Templars' intellectual and spiritual influence could endure, subtly shaping the course of history through ideas rather than armies. Architecture served as another enduring medium for the Templars' secretive legacy. Castles, preceptories, and chapels constructed by the Order often contained hidden chambers, secret passageways, and symbolic carvings. Many structures were designed with geometric precision and celestial alignment, hinting at a sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and sacred geometry. Some historians speculate that these buildings were designed not only for defense but also as repositories for hidden treasures and encoded knowledge. In this way, the physical remnants of the order acted as silent messengers, preserving information and signaling the Templars' enduring presence long after the Knights themselves were gone. The moral and ethical framework of the Templars played a crucial role in their survival. Even in exile, the Knights adhered to vows of obedience, loyalty, and secrecy. This discipline maintained cohesion among dispersed members, enabling them to preserve the order's knowledge, traditions, and influence despite extreme external pressure. Their commitment to a shared code of conduct also reinforced the perception of the Templars as principled guardians of hidden truths, capable of protecting knowledge, treasure, and ideals from corruption or misuse. The psychological impact of the Templar suppression further fueled their enduring legend. Their dramatic downfall created a sense of awe and fear that persisted across Europe. Stories of miraculous escapes, secret preceptories, hidden hoards, and coded messages proliferated, blending historical fact with imagination. The Templars became archetypal figures of courage, loyalty, and mystery, capturing the imagination of contemporaries and later generations alike. This tension between what was visible and what remained hidden is a key reason their story continues to resonate so powerfully. Exiled Templars also influenced other institutions. The Hospitallers, who absorbed some former members, gained access to Templar expertise in military strategy, fortification, and financial management. Sympathetic nobles provided sanctuary for knights and protected hidden treasures, allowing the order's influence to diffuse into European political, religious, and economic structures. In this way, the Templars' methods and knowledge persisted, often indirectly, shaping events and institutions long after the order ceased to exist formally. The notion of secret knowledge is central to understanding the Templars' post-suppression legacy. Legends suggest the order held manuscripts and mystical teachings that could alter religious, scientific, or philosophical understanding. While the specifics remain speculative, the perception of their hidden knowledge contributed to both fear and admiration. By encoding information, safeguarding manuscripts, and transmitting teachings orally, the Templars ensured the survival of their wisdom. This shadow network of knowledge became a defining feature of the order's enduring influence. Stories of hidden treasures, surviving knights, and clandestine operations reinforced the Templars' mythos. Accounts of secret preceptories, concealed wealth, and miraculous escapes maintained the perception that the order's power and influence were not extinguished but merely relocated. These stories, blending historical events with legend, created a compelling narrative that resonated through centuries, establishing the Templars as symbols of hidden authority and enduring mystery. The Templars' resilience highlights the importance of foresight, discipline, and strategic planning. By preparing for adversity through encoded manuscripts, hidden chambers, dispersed members, and secret networks, they ensured that their mission, values, and knowledge could survive even the most intense persecution. Their example demonstrates that true influence does not always require visible power. It can persist through the careful preservation of ideas, culture, and loyalty. Ultimately, the post-suppression era transformed the Templars from a tangible military and religious order into enduring symbols of secrecy, resilience, and hidden wisdom. Through dispersed members, hidden treasures, encoded knowledge, and symbolic architecture, their influence persisted across centuries. The question of what the Templars truly safeguarded, whether sacred relics, esoteric knowledge, or a combination of both, remains unresolved, sustaining the fascination and speculation that continues to surround their legacy. Even 7 centuries later, the Knights Templar stand as a testament to the enduring power of secrecy, discipline, and foresight. The survival of the Knights Templar after their dramatic suppression is a story that blends history with legend, fact with speculation, and resilience with secrecy. Though their official structures were dismantled and their leaders executed, the essence of the order did not vanish. Exiled knights, hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and clandestine networks ensured that the Templars' influence endured in ways that were invisible yet potent. This period represents not a collapse, but a transformation. a shift from overt power to subtle, enduring authority that would continue to shape Europe's religious, political, and cultural landscapes long after the order had officially ceased to exist. Dispersal was a defining characteristic of the Templars' post-suppression years. Many knights fled to Spain and Portugal, where the Reconquista offered both refuge and opportunity. Others moved to Scotland, the Holy Roman Empire, and regions across the British Isles, blending into local societies while preserving the discipline, loyalty, and operational expertise that had defined the order. These men acted as custodians of a hidden legacy, maintaining the values, knowledge, and strategies of the Templars while avoiding detection by hostile authorities. The ability to maintain cohesion and purpose in exile underscores the order's extraordinary organizational strength and strategic foresight. Hidden treasures were central to the Templars' enduring mystique. Accounts from chroniclers and later storytellers describe vast stores of gold, silver, jewels, and sacred relics concealed before Philip IV could seize them. Some of these items were said to possess spiritual significance, potentially including fragments of the True Cross, relics linked to the Holy Grail, or artifacts from the Temple of Solomon. While modern historians debate the veracity of these claims, the persistence of such stories highlights the perception that the Templars were guardians of power far beyond mere wealth. By securing these treasures, the knights ensured both material survival and symbolic authority, preserving a sense of awe, reverence, and mystery that would endure for centuries. Equally vital to their legacy was the preservation of knowledge. During their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Templars had access to manuscripts, codices, and oral traditions from Islamic, Jewish, and Christian sources. These included not only religious or philosophical writings but also practical knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and military strategy. After their suppression, surviving knights safeguarded these materials through careful concealment, coded communication, and oral transmission. Some scholars believe that this knowledge influenced later institutions and secret societies, suggesting that the Templars' intellectual legacy persisted even without formal organization. Architecture became a tangible vehicle for the preservation of influence. Castles, preceptories, and chapels constructed by the Templars often incorporated hidden chambers, secret passageways, and symbolic carvings. Some buildings were aligned with celestial events, reflecting an understanding of astronomy and sacred geometry. These structures served not only defensive or religious functions, but also as repositories for hidden knowledge and treasures. Even after the knights were gone, their architectural designs silently conveyed information, maintained their presence, and perpetuated the aura of mystery that surrounds the order to this day. The ethical and moral framework of the Templars was equally crucial to their survival. Vows of obedience, loyalty, and secrecy created cohesion among dispersed knights and ensured the preservation of the order's mission. This commitment to a shared code of conduct allowed former members to maintain operational integrity and safeguard valuable knowledge and treasures. The perception of the Templars as principled guardians further reinforced their mythos, establishing them as custodians not only of material wealth but of sacred knowledge and ethical discipline. Psychologically, the Templars' suppression had the unintended effect of enhancing their legend. The dramatic arrests, public trials, and executions inspired both fear and awe, creating a fertile ground for speculation. Stories of miraculous escapes, secret preceptories, hidden hoards, and encoded manuscripts proliferated, blending historical events with legend. The tension between what was publicly destroyed and what remained hidden strengthened the perception that the Templars' power and influence endured, invisibly but significantly. The integration of former Templars into other institutions also ensured continuity of influence. The Hospitallers absorbed some knights, incorporating their knowledge in fortification, logistics, and financial administration. Sympathetic nobles provided refuge, protecting both individuals and artifacts. Through these channels, Templar methods, knowledge, and values subtly influenced political, religious, and economic structures across Europe. Even in the absence of a formal order, the Templars' operational genius continued to shape events and institutions in ways that were often untraceable but deeply significant. The idea of secret knowledge is central to the enduring fascination with the Templars. Legends suggest that the order possessed manuscripts and teachings capable of altering religious, philosophical, or scientific understanding. While details are speculative, the notion of concealed wisdom enhanced the Templars' reputation as custodians of power and truth. By encoding manuscripts, hiding relics, and transmitting knowledge orally, the Knights ensured that their intellectual and spiritual influence could survive persecution, creating a hidden network of learning and tradition that would endure for generations. Accounts of hidden treasures, surviving knights, and clandestine operations reinforced the Templars' mystique. Stories of secret preceptories, miraculous recoveries of wealth, and covert operations maintained the perception that the Order's influence had not vanished but merely relocated. These narratives, blending fact and legend, created a compelling historical and cultural tapestry that has captivated imaginations for centuries. The Templars emerged as symbols of hidden authority, strategic foresight, and enduring mystery. The resilience of the Order highlights the importance of foresight, discipline, and planning in preserving influence. Through encoded manuscripts, hidden chambers, dispersed members, and secret networks, the Templars ensured the continuity of their mission, values, and knowledge. This illustrates a critical principle. True power often persists in unseen forms, sustained through loyalty, intellectual inheritance, and careful stewardship rather than through material or political dominance alone. Ultimately, the post-suppression period transformed the Templars from a military and religious order into symbols of enduring secrecy, moral integrity, and hidden knowledge. Through dispersed members, hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and architectural ingenuity, their influence persisted long after their formal dissolution. The question of what they truly safeguarded, whether relics, manuscripts, or esoteric wisdom, remains unresolved, sustaining fascination and speculation. Even centuries later, the Knights Templar continue to captivate historians, scholars, and the public imagination, a testament to the enduring power of secrecy, foresight, and disciplined purpose. The decades following the suppression of the Knights Templar are shrouded in mystery, a period in which the Order's overt power had vanished, but its influence continued to ripple quietly across Europe. While Philip IV and Pope Clement V believed they had extinguished a dangerous institution, the reality was far more complex. Dispersed knights, secret treasures, encoded manuscripts, and clandestine networks ensured that the Templars' legacy endured in ways that were subtle yet profoundly significant. This era illustrates how an organization can survive not through visible dominance, but through the careful preservation of knowledge, discipline, and loyalty, leaving a legacy that would inspire fascination and speculation for centuries. One of the most important aspects of this period was the dispersion of surviving knights. Many fled to Spain and Portugal, where the Reconquista created opportunities for military orders, and local rulers offered protection to experienced warriors. Others traveled to Scotland, the Holy Roman Empire, and parts of the British Isles, integrating into local societies while quietly preserving the Templars' values, codes, and expertise. These dispersed members acted as custodians of a hidden legacy, maintaining discipline, loyalty, and operational knowledge that had been honed over decades. Their ability to adapt to new environments while maintaining cohesion underscores the extraordinary organizational strength and foresight of the Order. Hidden treasures continued to play a central role in the Templars' enduring influence. Chronicles and later accounts describe vast stores of gold, silver, jewels, and sacred relics that were secreted away before Philip IV could seize them. Some of these treasures were believed to have spiritual significance, potentially including fragments of the True Cross, relics linked to the Holy Grail, or artifacts from the Temple of Solomon. Whether these treasures truly existed or have been exaggerated over time, the stories themselves reveal the perception of the Templars as custodians of power far beyond the ordinary. By hiding these assets, the Knights ensured both material security and symbolic authority, establishing a foundation for myths that would persist for centuries. Preservation of knowledge was equally vital. During their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Templars had acquired manuscripts, scrolls, and oral teachings from Islamic, Jewish, and Christian sources. These texts encompass theological, philosophical, scientific, and military information, After the Order's suppression, surviving knights safeguarded these materials through secrecy, coded communication, and strategic dispersion. Some scholars speculate that this knowledge later influenced other institutions or secret societies, suggesting that the intellectual legacy of the Templars persisted even without formal organization. The careful stewardship of information ensured that their influence endured in subtle, often invisible ways. Architecture served as another medium for preserving the Templars' influence. Fortresses, chapels, and preceptories often contained hidden chambers, secret passages, and symbolic carvings. Many structures were designed with precise geometric patterns and celestial alignments, reflecting knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and sacred geometry. These buildings served not only as defensive or religious structures, but also as repositories for hidden treasures and encoded knowledge. Even after the knights themselves were gone, these constructions acted as silent conveyors of the Order's presence and ingenuity, a permanent imprint of their strategic and intellectual foresight. The Templars' ethical and moral framework also contributed to the endurance of their influence. Vows of obedience, loyalty, and secrecy created cohesion among dispersed knights, enabling them to maintain operational integrity and safeguard valuable assets. This moral discipline reinforced the perception of the Templars as principled guardians, capable of preserving knowledge, treasures, and sacred ideals against overwhelming odds. Even in exile, these values provided a foundation for continuity, ensuring that the essence of the Order remained intact despite external pressures. The psychological impact of the Templar suppression further enhanced their legend. Their dramatic downfall inspired awe, fear, and fascination. Stories of miraculous escapes, hidden preceptories, secret treasures, and encoded manuscripts proliferated, blending history with legend. This tension between public destruction and hidden survival created a compelling narrative that captivated contemporaries and future generations alike. The Templars became archetypal figures of courage, loyalty, and secrecy, operating in a sphere of influence that extended far beyond their visible presence. Integration into other institutions further preserved the Templars' methods and influence. The Hospitallers absorbed some knights, gaining their knowledge in fortification, military strategy, and financial management. Sympathetic nobles protected individuals and artifacts, allowing the Order's principles and practices to diffuse subtly across political, religious, and economic spheres. Even without a formal hierarchy, the dispersed knights ensured that the Templars' operational genius continued to shape events and institutions, leaving a lasting imprint on European history. The concept of secret knowledge remains central to the Templars' enduring mystique. Legends suggest that the Order possessed manuscripts, teachings, or relics capable of altering religious, philosophical, or scientific understanding. While concrete evidence is scarce, the perception of hidden wisdom amplified the aura of the Templars as custodians of extraordinary power. Encoded manuscripts, architectural symbols, and oral transmission all contributed to the preservation of this knowledge, creating a shadow network that extended the Order's influence far beyond what was visible. Stories of hidden treasures and surviving knights reinforced the Templars' mythos. Accounts of secret preceptories, concealed wealth, and miraculous rescues maintained the perception that the Order's influence had not been extinguished but merely relocated. These narratives, blending historical events with legend, created a compelling tapestry that has captivated scholars, writers, and treasure seekers for centuries. The Templars emerged as enduring symbols of hidden authority, strategic foresight, and resilience under adversity. The resilience of the Templars underscores the importance of foresight, discipline, and strategic planning. By preparing for adversity through encoded manuscripts, hidden chambers, dispersed members, and clandestine networks, they ensured the survival of their mission, values, and knowledge. This demonstrates a fundamental principle. True influence often persists in unseen forms, maintained through loyalty, intellectual stewardship, and careful preservation rather than through overt power or material dominance. Ultimately, the post-suppression years transformed the Templars from a visible military and religious order into enduring symbols of secrecy, moral integrity, and hidden wisdom. Their dispersed members, hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and architectural ingenuity ensured that the Order's legacy persisted long after its official dissolution. The question of what the Templars truly safeguarded, whether sacred relics, esoteric knowledge, or both, remains unresolved, sustaining fascination, speculation, and the enduring mystery that defines their legacy to this day. Even centuries after their suppression, the Knights Templar continue to captivate the imagination, not merely for their military prowess or wealth, but for the enduring mystery surrounding their secrets. What makes their story so compelling is the tension between what was publicly destroyed and what may have survived in shadows. Dispersed knights, hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and symbolic architecture all contributed to a legacy that defies easy explanation. Their influence persisted not through overt power but through the careful preservation of knowledge, moral discipline, and strategic foresight. The legend of hidden treasure is central to the Templars' allure. Stories of gold, jewels, and sacred relics, possibly including fragments of the True Cross or even the Holy Grail, fueled speculation and inspired generations of treasure hunters. These tales were more than myth. They symbolized the Order's ability to safeguard what was deemed invaluable, material, or spiritual. The act of hiding these treasures suggests an intelligence and foresight that extended far beyond battlefield tactics, reinforcing the perception of the Templars as custodians of extraordinary power. Equally important is the preservation of knowledge. During their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Templars acquired manuscripts, oral traditions, and esoteric wisdom from diverse cultures. Even after persecution, surviving members safeguarded these insights, often encoding them or hiding them within architectural structures. This created a shadow network of knowledge that allowed the Order's intellectual and spiritual influence to persist despite the apparent collapse of its visible authority. Ultimately, the Templars' enduring mystique lies in their ability to survive invisibly. Their combination of discipline, secrecy, and foresight transformed them from a historical military order into a symbol of hidden knowledge, resilience, and moral courage. The question of what they truly protected, whether relics, manuscripts, or ancient wisdom, remains unanswered, keeping their story alive and compelling even in the modern imagination. The legacy of the Knights Templar after their formal suppression is a testament to the enduring power of secrecy, loyalty, and foresight. Though their visible authority had been dismantled, the essence of the Order persisted in the hands of dispersed knights who carried with them the knowledge, discipline, and traditions of a once mighty organization. These men became custodians of a hidden mission, safeguarding treasures, manuscripts, and sacred relics that authorities had sought to confiscate or destroy. Their survival demonstrates that influence does not rely solely on armies or political power. It can endure through careful preservation of knowledge, ethical discipline, and strategic foresight. The Templars' dispersal across Europe allowed them to adapt while maintaining cohesion. Knights who fled to Spain, Portugal, Scotland, and the Holy Roman Empire integrated into local societies, yet remained bound by the vows and codes that defined their order. These dispersed members acted as stewards of an invisible network, ensuring that the Templars' mission, values, and intellectual legacy continued even in the absence of formal structures. By safeguarding treasures and encoded manuscripts, they preserved both material wealth and symbolic authority, sustaining a mystique that would inspire fascination for centuries. Equally significant was the preservation of knowledge. The Templars had accumulated manuscripts, scrolls, and oral teachings during their campaigns in the Holy Land, encompassing theology, philosophy, military strategy, and practical sciences. After the suppression, these materials were carefully protected, often hidden, encoded, or transmitted orally to ensure continuity. Architecture also became a vehicle for secrecy. Castles, chapels, and preceptories incorporated hidden chambers, secret passageways, and symbolic carvings, silently conveying information long after the knights themselves had disappeared. Ultimately, the post-suppression years transformed the Templars from a visible order into symbols of secrecy, moral integrity, and hidden wisdom. Their dispersed members, hidden treasures, and preserved knowledge ensured the endurance of their influence, leaving a legacy of mystery, discipline, and foresight that continues to captivate the world. The story of the Knights Templar after their official suppression is as much about transformation as it is about survival. With their formal structures dismantled and their leaders executed, the order could no longer operate openly, yet its influence persisted through dispersed knights who carried the mission, knowledge, and discipline of the order into exile. These survivors became the stewards of a hidden legacy, safeguarding treasures, manuscripts, and sacred relics that authorities had tried to seize. Their ability to endure demonstrates that true influence is not solely measured by power or wealth, but by the careful preservation of knowledge, ethical principles, and strategic foresight. Dispersed across Europe, former Templars adapted to new circumstances while remaining bound by their vows of obedience, loyalty, and secrecy. Many found refuge in Spain, Portugal, Scotland, and parts of the Holy Roman Empire, where they continued to protect their treasures and encoded knowledge. These knights acted as custodians of an invisible network, maintaining cohesion and ensuring that the order's mission endured despite the absence of formal hierarchy. Their survival highlights the extraordinary resilience and foresight embedded in the Templar system, which allowed its influence to persist far beyond the collapse of its institutions. The preservation of knowledge was a cornerstone of this enduring legacy. During their campaigns in the Holy Land, the Templars had acquired manuscripts, scrolls, and oral teachings covering theology, philosophy, military strategy, and practical sciences. In exile, these materials were carefully protected, often encoded, hidden, or transmitted orally to trusted individuals. Architecture played a complementary role. Castles, chapels, and preceptories contained hidden chambers, secret passageways, and symbolic carvings, creating lasting physical legacies that conveyed knowledge and guarded secrets long after the knights themselves had vanished. Ultimately, the post-suppression period transformed the Templars from a visible military and religious order into enduring symbols of secrecy, wisdom, and moral integrity. Through their dispersed members, hidden treasures, and preserved knowledge, the Templars left a legacy that continues to inspire fascination, mystery, and scholarly inquiry, proving that even in apparent defeat, the order's influence could endure across centuries. The enduring legacy of the Knights Templar is defined not by their visible power, which was violently extinguished, but by the secrets, knowledge, and values they carried into exile. After the dramatic suppression, dispersed knights safeguarded hidden treasures, encoded manuscripts, and sacred relics, ensuring that the essence of the order persisted even in the absence of armies, castles, or formal authority. Their resilience demonstrates that influence can endure through foresight, discipline, and secrecy, creating a hidden network that would continue to inspire speculation, legend, and historical investigation for centuries. These knights, scattered across Europe, became custodians of an invisible mission. In Spain, Portugal, Scotland, and other regions, they integrated into local societies while maintaining the ethical and operational codes of the order. By protecting treasures and secret knowledge, they preserved both material and symbolic authority, ensuring that the Templar legacy remained alive despite the loss of formal structures. Their disciplined adherence to vows of loyalty and secrecy allowed the order's mission to survive, quietly influencing politics, religion, and culture in ways that were subtle yet enduring. Knowledge was central to the Templars' survival. Manuscripts and oral teachings acquired during the Crusades included theology, philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and military strategy. These materials were carefully concealed, encoded, or transmitted orally, forming a shadow network that perpetuated the order's intellectual and spiritual influence. Castles, chapels, and preceptories, with hidden chambers and symbolic designs, became tangible repositories for this knowledge, silently conveying information and safeguarding secrets across generations. Ultimately, the Knights Templar, though formally dismantled, transformed into symbols of secrecy, wisdom, and moral integrity. Their dispersed members, preserved treasures, and hidden knowledge created a legacy that transcends history, continuing to fascinate, inspire, and challenge our understanding of the medieval world. The question of what the Templars truly protected remains unresolved, leaving a powerful, enduring mystery that invites reflection on the unseen forces that shape history. The story of the Knights Templar concludes not with their fall, but with the enduring mystery they left behind. Though their order was dismantled, their secrets, treasures, and knowledge persisted, carried by dispersed knights and hidden networks. They became symbols of resilience, secrecy, and unwavering discipline, leaving traces in architecture, manuscripts, and legend. Even centuries later, the Templars inspire curiosity, speculation, and awe, challenging our understanding of history. Their true mission, the depth of their knowledge, and the treasures they safeguarded remain unresolved, inviting us to wonder. What if the greatest stories of history were never fully revealed? The story of the Knights Templar concludes not with their defeat, but with the enduring mystery they left behind. Though their order was dismantled, their hidden treasures, secret knowledge, and disciplined networks allowed their influence to persist across centuries. Dispersed knights safeguarded manuscripts, relics, and encoded teachings, ensuring that the order's mission lived on quietly, shaping events and inspiring legend. Castles, chapels, and preceptories became silent witnesses to their foresight and ingenuity. Today, the Templars remain symbols of secrecy, wisdom, and resilience, their true legacy hidden yet profoundly felt, inviting us to question how much of history is guided by what lies unseen.